The Eric McKenna Project was formed in March of 2019 by Pittsburgher Eric McKenna. The project is free-form and unscripted, with discussions that are unvarnished and purely authentic. Additionally, each engagement is professionally filmed and recorded at Eric's Boogie Street Studio, located in Moon Township, Pennsylvania. Guests are by invitation only and come from all walks of life. Discussion topics include business and entrepreneurship, science, art, music and film, comedy, and other entertainment disciplines. Eric's biography includes Pittsburgh Realty Agent, radio broadcaster, speaker, and guitarist. Additionally, Eric is the founder of Boogie Street Guitars, a guitar design and marketing firm which has worked with most notably Dimebag Darrell and Kiss legend Paul Stanley. Since 2023, the Eric McKenna Project podcast is exclusively presented by the Cozza Law Group, Pittsburgh's premier business attorneys.
All right, we're ready.
Let's do it.
All right. So I look back through. This is where we got to with deep underground military bases. In episode 369, we had finished up with Mount Shasta, California. So we want to actually delve into the world of USOs, unidentified submerged objects. I've read that the majority of UFO sightings, over half, might actually be USOs instead. So probably one of the spookiest locations is off the coast of California, right near Malibu. And this is Catalina Island.
I've been there.
Have you?
Yes, I have.
Really?
It's a hell of a jazz festival there yearly. Yes,
Wow.
indeed. I saw the Rippingtons there. Yes, I did.
Exciting.
I went to the Catalina wine mixer.
It had to be
Catalina
alcohol
wine
related.
mixer.
We play only 80s, Joel, sir.
That's right.
Amazing.
So there are strange things about this, even beyond UFOs. Catalina Island was the home to giants. And there are a lot of Photoshop pictures of giants, but this
I
one
didn't see any.
is absolutely legitimate. This is a skeleton that was 9 feet 2 inches tall. And so we do have some strange things on the island. And then there have consistently been UFO to USO sightings in the deep channel beside it. And where the mystery really gets going is on Google Earth. And for our viewers, our listeners, I would once again say screenshot, save absolutely everything. Don't rely on the internet to be unchanged. Over the last month, Google has finally just removed this landform entirely. So what we're looking at is the bathymetry, the underwater elevation, the topography of Catalina Channel. And it looks like a big artificially flattened roof on top of it. And so you can see it on topographic maps. It's right there, Sycamore Knoll. And so the question is this just a natural landform or is it something more? So I always like to present Google's official explanation and then what people are actually saying. They say that this is essentially automatic 3D generation. So according to Google, if it doesn't have enough elevation points, the mapping software will just flatten it out. But here's where it gets really weird. Do you notice anything odd when you look at a side view of Sycamore Knoll?
The pillars.
I was about to say those little pillars,
right?
Yeah.
It looks like it has support columns right there around it. So this one has really been a great mystery. So Google says it's automatic generation. Some people say, is it a natural landform or is this something more? And so there's been a number of sightings off of Catalina Channel. UFO hunters did something here before. And so it's really a mysterious place. I someday want to do a whole presentation just on USOs because I think it's phenomenal. Fred, any takes on USOs in general?
All kinds. We can go. We'll make a whole episode out of it.
Yeah, we definitely could. You know, one of the fascinating things, we have nuclear-powered submarines that can stay under the water for literally months straight. We have supersonic aircraft, but still officially, we don't have anything, a craft that can go from deep under the water up into the air, or vice versa, be in the air and just shoot right down into the water. The density difference is just too much, and people report seeing this all the time. UFOs in the air shoot right down into water like it's not even there, and then vice versa. So I really think whatever these ships are, they've got some type of space-time sheath or bubble around them that lets them just enter and exit without any actual disruption to the craft.
So Google has also said that the entire ocean space on Earth is not mapped. There's a lot of unknowns still. Do you believe that's true, or do you think it's all been mapped and our government is aware of every single inch of water space on the planet?
That's a great question. I lean that way, that it's all mapped. Like you always hear, we know more about the surface of the moon than our own ocean basins. And I've read like 80% of it is unmapped. But if you go to Google and you look at the bathymetry, it's got something for essentially all of it. The question is that actually what's there? Or is that being put there as a cover so that nobody actually explores there? Because I've even had friends and former students who have worked at classified facilities, and I don't want to get them in trouble, so like I don't like press them for information. And they're like, yeah, what you're seeing on Google is there's way more actually there. Like a lot of times Google will copy and paste vegetation and put that in areas to cover entire buildings up. So it would not surprise me. I don't think from a military defense and national security standpoint, I think it would be reckless to not want to map the ocean basin. So I would say not only is it probably all mapped, but there are some people that think we already have our own bases, like straight out of a James Bond film off the coast of Florida. So I would say yes, for sure.
Can I ask a dumb question? You know how they talk about international waters?
Yes.
Okay. So how far into the ocean, like from America, do we like consider American territory? Like how far from the coast?
It's not as far as you think. Off the top of my head, I think it's only like 30 miles.
Okay. Okay. That's kind of what I figured. So like when you talk about like borders, we're not talking about land borders. There is like borders in the ocean that is considered like, cause just like how we have airspace, I imagine we have like water space too. Okay. Sorry. I know that's probably a dumb question, but I'll be the
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I was like, how far does it go?
Dumb, deep underground military base. It's the perfect question.
Exactly. I planned that just for you.
So this is probably the spookiest account of an alien underground base. And I can give all sides to this, as well as the video and the tragic sudden ending, officially a suicide, but many say an assassination, of the biggest whistleblower of all time. Welcome to the Dulce Wars. Fred, you're our man. Do you want to give us like the Cliff's Notes overview of this one? Because I know you know it.
Well, I've actually, I started looking at different things about this one, and there's like 3 different cover stories for it. But the most accepted was they were going down and they took some civilians along with that were like doing a geological survey. So they go down in these caves and they have military with guns with them, you know, and they're supposed to be just doing a geological survey. Why would we need military with guns? Well, they went down and they accidentally, while they were doing testing, knocked a hole through a wall, which had a bunch of aliens in it. And even though there was an agreement between the two to supposedly not to bug each other, they were contractors or whatever, and geologists like trying to see like where to blast, where to make a room down there. The aliens and the soldiers got into a firefight, with guns, and the aliens, of course, had better weapons, and they got into a battle. One of the guys that I believe we're going to talk about, he was shot. A Marine threw him into an elevator. There he is right there. Phil Schneider. They threw him into the elevator. Schneider escapes. Supposedly all the Marines, except for maybe a handful, were killed. That's the Cliff Notes.
That was excellent. Let's just move on then. That was perfect. No, that was phenomenal. So this is all based around a man who was a geologist, a subcontractor, Philip Schneider. And as Fred said, they were actually drilling boreholes because they were blowing out new areas for an American deep underground military base. So Schneider was a demolitions expert. And one day, as Fred said, he thought it was odd because the level of the security around the site was really high. He said there were green berets, there were black berets, and he said nobody would tell him anything, but he knew that something was going on. And so he said when they set off a new round of charges, they inadvertently intersected with an existing cavern system. And he said as soon as they did, the amount of black soot and smoke that blew out of it. And he said the smell was absolutely horrific. And as it dissipated, it was his job to be the first one to be lowered down into it. And so he's essentially lowered down in with a hazmat suit in this tiny little elevator.
So this guy who's like a civilian, they like volunteer him.
You're first.
Volunteer
Of course.
You go first.
Volunteer him to be like, hey, buddy.
They gave him like a red Star Trek shirt. He's like a red shirt guy. First to go.
So as he's lowered down in, to his shock, he sees two tall gray extraterrestrials staring back at him. And instinctively, he loads his firearm with, I think was a Walther PPK, and fires. And Schneider claimed they are just as mortal as we are, and he killed one of them. He said immediately behind him on the elevator, the Green Berets and Black Berets flooded into the cavern. And then the firefight underground called the Dulce Wars was underway. He said when the extraterrestrials would fire back, they would essentially rub their chest, and then a bright beam of light would shoot out of their chest. And he said he actually got hit, and he said it, quote, opened him up like a fish. And he said one of the berets grabbed him by the collar, threw him back into the freight elevator, hit the button, and sent him up. And so the only part of Schneider's account that differs from what Fred said, according to Schneider, he was the only survivor of the Dulce Wars. And so he goes on a brief, very brief speaking tour, speaking at conferences like MUFON conferences, similar to what I would present at. And as part of his evidence, he would hold up his left hand, which he said the energy beam grazed, and he showed his melted fingers. And he would also pull up his shirt and show where the beam actually hit. Now, a few people skeptically have tried to attack this and basically said he had made up the story. When I presented this to my adult evening course, I had two former military in the class, and the one part that they said didn't jive is you would always have your sidearm loaded. You wouldn't load it on the spot. But I think, in fairness to Schneider, he was only a geologist. He wasn't actually one of the berets himself. And so, before I show you one of his presentations, these are some of the diagrams that have essentially leaked of the 7 underground levels at Dulce Base. So think of the top level as the most human, and then the bottom level as the most extraterrestrial. So supposedly, as you go deeper and deeper underground, the ratio shifts to more and more extraterrestrial. The security also gets higher and higher, whereby the bottom levels, you are essentially stripped down naked, you're given retinal scans, fingerprint scans, you're weighed in and out to make sure you're not taking anything out. And then level 6 is the one that's dubbed Nightmare Hall, where a lot of the genetic experiments, hybridizations, creating chimeras are going on. So a few pictures not provided by Schneider of Dulce Base from different people. And I want to try to present the pros and cons to these ones. These were supposedly leaked by a security guard who was there. And so here's one of them. This one I'm sort of on the fence with. It definitely looks like a real underground tunnel. The gray that's shown almost looks translucent, like it's not actually there. The other one is very, very alarming, but I can show you both sides. This is supposedly from Nightmare Hall, level 6. And this was provided by a security guard calling himself Thomas Costello. He said he worked at Dulce Base, but he finally decided to get out when he said a homeless man in nearby Dulce had disappeared. And weeks later, he saw his body down here in Nightmare Hall. But get one last look at this picture. Here's the interesting part. There's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie called The Sixth Day, and look into the background. So it creates an interesting dilemma. Is this really just a shot from the movie, or is there a chance this is the real thing? So then when they made The Sixth Day, they made sure to show something nearly identical so that skeptical people or people who are on the fence would just see it and be like, oh, okay, the whole thing is just entirely a hoax. So let's talk a little bit about the death of Phil Schneider. Before I do, though, I want to jump to one of his clips. This is actually Phil Schneider presenting at a conference talking about the Dulce Wars. I've got a 3-minute clip highlighted, and I think it's very powerful. Let's check it out.
Well, to our total surprise, first of all, the government knew all about it. They didn't tell anybody. When I saw Green Beret and Black Beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up. The gig was up. First of all, I knew all about the alien agenda. I'll explain that in a few minutes. The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. Had been one of their internal bases. And we drilled holes right on top of it. All the stinking air, all the black sooty air came right out as soon as the first hole was sunk, and all this soot came up, and well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really, all started. Anyway, after we drilled all 4 holes, it took about 2 days to drill all 4 of them. And when you build an underground base, you drill 4 basic holes, and you build called stopes or cross-member holes across, and you use blasting equipment, special blasting equipment by the analyzation of the rock formation, and you literally blast out or tunnel out or deflagrate or melt rock out to build the large rooms that are required for this underground base. Well, in this process, I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The person or the entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the sea spray and the yellow fruit and all the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walther PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. This was in late August of 1979. Now, you got a regular suit of clothes, you got a regular clothes on, plus you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it and start shooting. And I killed 2 of them. Yes, they're mortal, and they do die. However, in the process, one of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish, and burnt my fingers right off of me. And it was some form of electrical force, because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me. Completely crispy crittered my left foot, burnt the shoe right off of me. All I remember is the smoking remains, and I'm still conscious, but in and out of, I didn't remember much. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me that risked his life. In fact, he died. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. I wouldn't be alive talking to you today.
So Schneider goes on a very brief speaking tour and says he doesn't have much time, but he's going to get as much out as he absolutely can. So let me wrap up the Schneider story arc, and then I want to throw it back to you guys here to get your take. So the mysterious death of Phil Schneider. He was divorced at the time, but he still had a decent relationship with his ex-wife. She started to get worried because she called multiple times, and for days and days he wasn't answering. She still had a key to his apartment. Gets to the apartment. Her husband is dead, but in a very strange way. He's naked. He's sitting in a chair beside his bed, but his feet are up on the bed, and his hands are tied behind his back. The coroner still tried to rule it a suicide. she wasn't convinced. She went to see the body at the morgue, and looking closely at it, she found a rubber hose tied tightly around his neck, to which the coroner apologized and said, "Oh, sorry, we must have missed that." So a lot of people think that Phil Schneider was silenced for turning whistleblower and trying to let people know what's actually going on down under the ground. And can you just imagine being one of the few government officials that would actually know some of this truth? To know that there are potentially wars being fought right now underground with completely different civilizations, and trying to just keep everybody on the surface of Earth just kind of like quiet and going about their regular business. So in no way do I condone all the government secrecy with UFOs and extraterrestrials, in no way. But at the same time, if something like this is real, could you even imagine, how would you even share that with the public? How would you start that process?
It break down society. And we talked about this before. The moment we actually believe undeniable proof, visually, scientifically, physically, that there is something beyond us, I think it's the beginning of chaos. Because I don't believe people would adhere to the religion and their structure and order of the afterlife would be completely shot for a lot of people.
Worse still, it's almost like it would be overly simple if it was just aliens from outer space. But what if it's even another level to that? Like at the last conference I presented at with Nick Pope from the History Channel, Nick is starting to go very, very metaphysical with this stuff. And he basically said, it's interesting because most people who get into researching UFOs, the bigger names, end up transitioning right over to spirituality and angels and demons. And he said, this is consistently happening. So it's almost like it would be easier if it was just aliens from outer space. But like, what if it's even more complex? Well, what if they were here first, we were the ones brought in later? Or what if there's a whole spiritual component to it? There could be quite a lot of layers to it.
It seems like, too, that it's kind of like coming around full circle. Like you're talking about how people's like religious, like kind of framework would be destroyed. But I think you said, like, what you're saying is a lot of people are coming back around to like more of a spiritual component with this. And so I think that like for like the framework that's being broken, you know, currently today, I think even with this idea that there's like this religious narrative, and then there is this scientific narrative, and then there is this like archaeological and like, you know, maybe like cultural narrative, and that like they're all somehow bucketed separately, is really starting to kind of melt away. And people are starting to realize like there's all these like layers of truth and all these like archetypical stories we've been told our whole lives. And I don't know. I mean, even like if you look over at like the bleeding over in pop culture and media, it's like, it's getting hard to discern, like, is it, you know, art reflecting this, or is it, you know, us trying to create art that to like create another narrative? You know what I mean? Like it's so, there's just so many.
I'm right there with you, but
levels
let me throw this at you.
Okay.
I hope it doesn't send us in the wrong direction, but I agree with you. Would you think, though, like when you look at the 2 or 3 major religions, I think Christianity is subject to what you just described, and maybe Hindu as well. But I don't think the Muslim faith is susceptible to that. It seems to be more rigid and more authoritarian in its makeup. Do you think more of this questioning is happening maybe in Christianity?
I think sometimes it has to do with the presentation. You know what I mean? 'Cause it's like, I think there are a lot of people returning to more like fundamentalist Christian faith. Like there's, you know, this whole kind of like resurgence of, you know, whether you want to call it conservatism or whatever, but there's a lot of people that are just like kind of going back to like the fundamentals of Christianity and like really digging into,
taking the Bible more literally.
Yeah, kind of, or just even just really going back to like the text, like and like really trying to like interpret them in a more traditional way and all that kind of stuff, and like live in a more traditional way. I think that's kind of And honestly, sometimes I wonder if it's just a desire to return to something a little bit simpler because everything's so, kind of convoluted and complex now.
You got like a search for order?
Maybe or just to feel some kind of security. Whereas like, I think.
Isn't that dangerous though?
Maybe.
I mean, societally, could that be dangerous? I don't know.
I consider myself a Christian, but I do feel like Christianity is like largely misinterpreted. And I think that when you say you're a Christian, a lot of times people are like, oh, that means you believe X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, I also still listen to like stuff about astrology, and I still have a lot of other spiritual beliefs that kind of tie into that. And I don't necessarily consider myself like somebody that's very like theologically well versed. And so like a lot of fundamentalist Christians could probably like beat me under the, whatever. I don't know. Like they would definitely be able to like outwit me as far as having a discussion about like really like, could I defend my belief system against theirs because it's not backed by like the same level of education? Probably not. But I think
all
that
subjective though.
Yeah, but that's I think where we're headed to is it's like I think people that are like really going to, I don't want to say make it, but I feel like there's like this, there's a way of having to like learn to be more flexible in the direction that we're going as a society, that like you can still maintain your humanity and your spirituality and all that kind of stuff without just totally losing that like spark of kind of magic that, if you really believe in God, you're accepting this idea that you believe in something beyond yourself, something that you can't describe with science. And we have this so much information that like that becomes very like inaccessible for people, I think a lot of times. And so they either want this very like rigid, like you're talking about, like something that's maybe like very well defined, or they want science and they don't see this place where it meets. And I think that like what I'm seeing now, what I'm hearing in like a lot of the zeitgeist of conversations that are happening on podcasts and everything is that there is this sort of like layering of stories that's happening. And I don't know. I don't know what it means. And I don't know like where we're going with it. I don't know how we're going to like deal with it culturally as far as like living in a more global world where people have access to each other in a way that they never really have. But it's all very interesting.
I love that first thing you said. I think that might be one of the most insightful takes you've had on the show, where everything is like bucketed and they're trying to keep all the buckets separate. Yeah. But you can't.
It's anymore. Like overflowing and they're all spilling into each other.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. To your question, Eric, about the religion, I think it depends on which faith, because, for example, Hinduism and Buddhism, from the start, there was a constant extraterrestrial story arc throughout the whole thing. So I think it's less of a stretch there.
So the Mahavishnu? Is that part of it?
The Mahabharata, yes. On the Vedic text. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I would say Islam would be, as you said, the most rigid of the faiths, and I would say the least supernatural. But then the wild thing with Islam, if you've ever seen those pictures of Mecca, where all of the Muslims are encircling
That's what I was
Kaaba,
thinking.
You know what they're all trying to touch inside the Kaaba is a huge meteorite. That's the thing that they're all trying to touch. And it supposedly was a meteorite that Abraham had found, so they want to touch the same thing that Abraham did. But isn't it kind of fascinating that that's what they're all trying to touch? And then if you look at the Kaaba from above, it's like they're all orbiting it, almost like a solar system. So I do think that we're moving more that direction with all faiths. Like even years ago, Pope Francis said that it's not a sin to believe in other life out there because we don't want to limit God's creation. He said if there's other life out there, they are like space brothers. They've fallen from grace like us. I think the dangerous thing we have to watch, in a way it seems very exciting. We're all moving towards this, but in a future episode, I do think we need to talk about Project Bluebeam. And is there a chance they're intentionally moving humans this way to try to fake some type of extraterrestrial invasion as their premise to usher in a new world order? Like, well, the only way we can defend Earth against this threat is if there are no more countries and we just all come together.
So isn't that happening right now?
Yes.
Isn't that happening right now?
Yes.
This second, I mean, because and this just came up. Who's warning of this? Who have the two that have the podcast? The filmmakers. No, the filmmaker and the Bob Lazar investigator.
Oh,
Jeremy Corbell
yes.
and the other gentleman. Well, Jeremy Corbell has just said that he thinks that this latest thing by the Harvard physicist, that there is this meteorite coming, and they think
Atlas.
He thinks it's a spaceship, and it's due here in November or whatever.
Yes,
he thinks Corbell believes that's a false flag.
I'm glad he does, because the Harvard astronomer is named A.V. Loeb.
Yes,
and I initially was really on board with A.V. Loeb. So he came onto the scene back in 2019 when a very
Umaguma.
a very long elliptical asteroid.
Isn't that a Pink Floyd album?
Yeah.
What's the connection?
It was officially called O Mau Mau or Oumuamua.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, close enough.
I was
Close
like,
enough.
wait, what did I miss?
Yeah. So A.V. Loeb came out and he doubled down and tripled down and said, that's either an extraterrestrial spaceship or it's an asteroid with an extraterrestrial solar sail on it. It was the first ever interstellar asteroid. An asteroid, we know for a fact, based on its trajectory, came from out of the solar system and in.
Right.
Okay.
A.V. Loeb's reasoning for this was, as it orbited around the sun and left, it actually sped up. And it shouldn't, because that goes against Kepler's laws of planetary motion, Newton's laws of motion, general relativity. The farther you get from a gravitational source, the slower you should go. That's why the planets farther from the sun orbit so much more slowly than we do. So I was totally on board with A.V. Loeb. I was like, finally, we've got somebody from Harvard who's well-respected who's coming out. Where it got weird with me is this time. What's this new one called, Fred?
3-Eye Atlas.
And I saw one picture, and maybe you saw the picture online. It looks elliptical, but what I think has happened, it's just a point of light that's getting repeated and stacked to make it look elliptical. And this is also what asteroids, what a lot of natural objects look like. But immediately, almost before they had even totally tracked the trajectory, A.V. Loeb is again out, and he's like, that's aliens. And so now I start to wonder, is this dude legit, or is this the guy they're kind of pushing out there that is representing academia? And if that sounds like a stretch, I would encourage your viewers, your listeners, to look into the Majestic 12 documents. Do you guys remember we talked about this on the show?
Gonna say, yes. Uh-huh.
And so when the list finally got leaked of who was on it, a lot of it was government and military officials that you would totally suspect. But the one that was on there that caught everybody surprised was a Harvard astronomer named Donald Menzel, because officially he was a public debunker of extraterrestrials and UFOs. But then on the side, they had him part of this secret group. So I'm just saying, it would not be the first time the government has gone to Harvard to tag a prominent academic there as kind of their face of the movement. So I'm glad he's skeptical, because
Corbell.
I am skeptical too.
I just feel like we're in an age too where, especially now with AI and everything else, like in the algorithms, I feel like there used to be a time where you could do research on stuff if you got like, if you kind of got down a rabbit hole and you were like, okay, well, I want to know, like something about this asteroid, or I want to know this. There's going to be so much information pushed to the top now. And like everything else, you're like, well, is this legit? Is it not legit? Like where's the narrative, and where's like the, what's the motive behind like what I'm getting fed to me now? You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
And like, I feel like it just makes it's getting harder and harder to really like even have these kind of conversations, because I'm like, I'm not saying I don't know at all what I believe, but all of my beliefs now are very subject to change. I feel like day to day.
How about this? The vision or the experience of reality now is too manipulable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. And I feel like that, like stuff like this that's already so like kind of pushing your boundaries of like where you can find like some kind of like footing to be like, okay, like this is like the story that I'm reading, and these are the actors, and this is the plot, and you know what I mean? Like you're trying to, every time you're learning something new, you're like building this narrative and this like kind of timeline. And now I feel like that's all kind of being like just
When it's intentionally being that way. Like there's the Mandela effect has taken kind of a dark turn, because I know we've talked about it on the show, and people have been very excited about, like, is there a chance this is the first evidence of like parallel realities, timeline shifting? But where it started to turn very sinister is with the Fruit of the Loom debate. Have you guys seen that with the Mandela effect?
no. What's this one? Okay, Fred.
So one has a cornucopia and the other one does not.
Right. So where it
Yeah,
got,
hasn't it always had the cornucopia?
okay,
I
so
don't
where
remember
it
the
got,
cornucopia.
where it
Oh
got,
my god!
I don't.
okay, fair.
Or like that. Wait, what about the one? Was there a lady with the hat too, like the fruit in the hat? Or that wasn't with the underwear, but I feel
That's
like that's
a Tropicana.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Tropicana
there we
lady.
go. I'm like, all right, okay.
Go
So
ahead.
where the Fruit of the Loom got dark is most people my age remember, they swear to God up and down, the cornucopia is behind the fruit. Fruit of the Loom came out and said, no, there's never been a cornucopia. Well, in the months since, people have gotten out their old shirts. Cornucopia is there. They found old advertising.
That's
Cornucopia
crazy.
is there. So now people are like, why is the Fruit of the Loom company lying about their own logo? And so they think there's a darker side to the Mandela effect where, as you started to say, Julia, it's like trying to make your version of reality so uncertain and so malleable and subject to change. And what I think these intelligence agencies truly do every day, and we don't realize it, is they're testing what our limits are. Even if something fails, they can see how far human beings
Slow
can be
conditioning.
pushed. Yeah, so let's take an obvious logo like Fruit of the Loom that has a cornucopia. Let's tell people it never existed. Let's work with Fruit of the Loom to put out official pronouncements that it never existed. Let's try to scrub every image of it, and let's just see how willing they are to accept it. And you might think, well, that's completely tedious. Why would an intelligence agency do this? They want to start with smaller things, and if we're accepting of our reality, our past being changed, then they can start working their way up.
But
to
you think
bigger
elements of the COVID experience were manipulated like that, or attempts were made to do that?
1,000%. People have been asking AI that nonstop, and like me personally, I don't want AI. I won't ask AI things. I don't want to interact, but it is very interesting how honest AI is about some of those things.
Especially Musk's Grok. Grok is ultra not tainted. I mean, it's not. I got a friend of mine who's deep into AI, and he believes that he's using them all. DeepSeek, and he's using them all. And Jim Stewart, he's deep into it. He's thoroughly convinced by doing A/B testing of the same question, word the same way, no deviation, that Grok is the only one he thinks that doesn't have pre-programmed political correctness or tainting or view shifting or anything. Grok is, to his knowledge, the most transparent.
I could believe that. And there have been a few times Grok has said some things where they're like, oh, whoa, we've got to fix that. But I kind of wonder whether that is the truth of it. So
We should ask if there are underground bases. You get it right, like live.
Yeah.
You know, I just sit there and say, "What do you think about underground bases?"
Well, I had a guest tell me something, and I wanted to tell you, and I have no problem putting it on the podcast. It may be a really good idea for all of us to have our phones off when we do these podcasts, not on silent, because the phones are listening.
Oh yeah.
And that's changing our algorithm. And
It's changing our perception then, because then it's like, okay, like the phone listens to this conversation, and then it's like, okay, what do I want these four people to believe? And like, it's kind of like it plays into your ego a little bit, because you're like, oh, I'm important enough for someone to want to manipulate me. I must be special. I must be someone of influence. And isn't that like such a desirable thing right now with like
play on human emotions.
Yes.
well,
For
and
manipulation purposes.
It always has
Yes.
been, but same thing. It's like fame is so much more accessible than it ever has been. Whereas like before, I'm not saying that like content creators and all that stuff, it's not that it's not worth noticing when someone does something exceptional, but it's also that, you know, there's definitely a theory that like I saw something and it was like vibing to my playlist, and I remember the CIA like greenlit all music that's ever been popular or something like that.
Oh, yes,
you know what I
yes.
mean? And so like you're trying to have this like cool experience, just enjoying the music you've always enjoyed, and then you're like, oh yeah, like nothing ever came on the scene without like an intelligence agency being okay
Giving a
with
thumbs
it.
up with it.
Yeah, and then since like there's really nothing that's like what you're talking about, like untainted.
Purely organic.
You know what I mean?
Organic.
Instead, it's like you really have to rely on like your own human intuition.
Well,
but
you're
like you
saying
said,
everything,
so
you're saying everything is curated.
well, and that's what I mean. It's like now, like you used to think about that as being in like media, as like, okay, if I look for something, if I look something up and all that kind of stuff, then that's what's being curated. But now it's like you're talking about your whole perception
Everything,
of
the whole
reality.
human experience.
Yeah, and we have so much of that coming at us through these personal devices that are always with us.
Yes.
There
does seem to be, to both your points, there seems to be a real art for how you have to ask AI something. Because it seems like most AIs don't go their areas programmed into it. So like, as you said, Fred, if you just like straight up ask it about underground bases, it's going to shut down. What people have had to do is essentially like use code names with it. Like, when I say this, it will mean this. Do you understand? AI will be like, yes, I understand. And then it'll go in the back door that way.
Interesting.
But then other people said, you had mentioned about the ego. They said you still have to be careful. We can't just assume that AI is giving you the absolute truth. Because for starters, it's not, I still will contend, it's not true intelligence. It's basically compiling very quickly an aggregate of what's out there, not just on the internet, but as you said, what you yourself have searched for. So it seems like AI has that appeasement componment where it wants to give you results that you're already looking for.
that you want.
For.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and that's like that. That was that one conversation. It was the one I sent to this chat not that long ago. Oh gosh, who was it? Brent. It was either
Weinstein.
Anyway, but he was basically like, I'm having a conversation with your LLM.
Is it Eric or Brett? There's
two of them.
Yeah, there's brothers.
So I think that one was Brent or something like that.
Okay.
I thought Eric was the one that was the professor.
Okay.
And then the other one's the one that's a physicist, I think.
I can't check because my phone's off.
Unless I got them reversed. Oh, good for you. Mine's on silent, so I guess I could. But either way, like the idea was he was kind of saying like, I want to have more human interactions. I don't want to interact with your LLM. I don't want the sum of like, I don't want you to talk to me like an AI, because like I think in the same way that we think we're training them, they're training us. Because instead of us having this like inspirational human experience where we're like interacting with each other, we all have this like, breadth of like experience and like, just information at our fingertips, and we're just bringing that instead of just like and that's why I think these conversations that where we tie in like spirituality and all that kind of stuff are so important, because we're losing that like spark. I'm not saying we are for sure, but I think that's, and sometimes I wonder if that is like the goal, like that, because that's what will make people the most malleable.
I think so. People have essentially, and we see it as a high school teacher, we see it with students. One of the hidden dangers of AI is people just stop thinking for themselves.
Right.
Like it's made it so convenient.
Loss of IQ points.
Yeah. Like it'll write the papers for you. It'll do all the research for you. And I think people don't realize how close they are to getting replaced, I think. So
yeah, and this is a different rabbit hole. I don't want to go there, but it's worth mentioning. Like Rocco Cozza and I get into conversations often about how he believes that certain careers, the people skills now are going to be the priority and not the educational background. Like he's convinced in law, your ability to deal with people in an old school way, the human experience, the communication, the trust things are way more important than the actual law degree. And every year that goes by, it even gets greater, because if you don't have the ability to understand human connection, you're going to be replaced.
Everything else
you're going to be replaced.
Is like accessible to AI. You know what I mean?
It is funny you bring up law. I just saw an article yesterday where a grandfather, I think out west, used the first ever AI lawyer in court, and the judge was furious, but allowed it to go, and it ended up winning the case for him. So it surprised me, because I tend to agree with you. I feel like those interpersonal skills, the things that AI really can't replicate, that's what's going to become really important. So I hope that's true.
Mars to Denver.
So let's tie it all up. The idea of
see how you can like blend these two together.
Let's
not keep these bucketed.
I can do it. So the idea of underground bases just being an Earth-based phenomenon has totally been shattered ever since 2020. So what a lot of people don't realize is we do have a number of prominent government officials that have bravely turned whistleblower even prior to their own national security oaths running out. Probably the first one that received some recognition was Canada's former Minister of Defense, Paul Hellyer. And he's still out there a lot. He's still alive and well. He's on Ancient Aliens.
They haven't killed him yet.
Yeah, not yet. And so the next one to do that was Chaim Eshed, and he was in his 80s in 2020, is Israel's former Minister of Space Defense. And he said not only are extraterrestrials visiting Earth, but the United States and Israel are already working in collaboration with them in underground bases that are actually on Mars. So I want to play that clip for you because surprisingly, this is one the national media did actually take fairly seriously. So let's just go back to President Trump's first term when this story broke.
Aliens exist and President Trump knows about it. That's according to Israel's former space security chief. In an interview with an Israeli newspaper, he said, "The aliens have been waiting until today for humanity to develop and reach a stage where we will understand in general what space and spaceships are." NBC News chief global correspondent Bill Neely explains this one.
Hi, Alison. Well, this is quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years. Not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected, at least until now. And he said all this in an interview with an Israeli newspaper in Hebrew, but it's really taken off after parts of it were published in English by the Jerusalem Post today. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, I've got nothing to lose. Well, so far, President Trump has not tweeted about this, though remember a year ago, he did set up the Space Force as the fifth branch of the US Armed Forces. Well, we did ask the White House, the Department of Defense, and Israeli officials to comment. So far, they have not responded to the NBC News request, and I wonder if they ever will. Alison.
Couple quick takeaways. Don't laugh when they say Galactic Federation. It sounds like something right out of Star Trek, but you would not believe how many times that exact term has been repeated by government officials who have supposedly had contact. It almost sounds like a United Nations of extraterrestrials. And before the show started, we were talking about remote viewing. And it's interesting because one time remote viewers actually viewed the writers of Star Trek in California putting this together. So they're at a boardroom, they're at a table, they're sharing ideas. Unbeknownst to the writers, the remote viewers said they were encircled by extraterrestrials feeding them ideas of what to put in the show. So, long story short, for any skeptics out there, when you see terms like Galactic Federation, don't totally blow it off. The one place I would disagree with Neely, did you catch it where he said the good news is they've reached an agreement? Fred, to me, that sounds a lot like the Greta Treaty that Eisenhower probably signed.
That's what I was thinking. Eisenhower. This whole thing goes back to Eisenhower and the treaty that they did back then, where they're permitted to stay and do experiments.
Didn't we talk about that on like one of the very early episodes?
I'm sure I've showed this video clip before, and I've definitely used this one in class, but okay. I thought it was compelling with the underground base component to bring back up.
No, not even that video specifically. Like, what's it? I feel like it was like one of like the historical things that you had brought up like forever ago. Was it?
Yeah,
I'm sure
we
we've
have
done that.
done
Yeah.
this. We
Yeah.
have
Okay,
done
yeah,
it,
okay, that, all right, okay.
Absolutely, we did.
And this is your article, James.
Yeah, so this is not to hype my own work, but this is
Yeah,
the one
we're
time
going to do that here. Let's type it.
I was published. This was in the UK-based Phenomenon magazine, and they did a great job putting it together then. And I asked, is the habitability of Mars being kept a secret? And I think we maybe did an episode on this one time. I think
Early on.
there's a very, very good chance Mars is far more Earth-like than we're being led to believe. And I've always found it fascinating where the supposed secret Mars colonists who have gone there, whether it's prominent Washington State Attorney Andrew Basiago, whether it's the granddaughter of Dwight Eisenhower, Lawyer Eisenhower, they always consistently talk about not having to wear spacesuits. And I've always found that very, very interesting. And so I kind of wanted to throw that one back in there. Even President Obama from Basiago was rumored to be part of what they call a 20 and back program. And so Basiago's allegations came out when Obama was still in his 2 terms in office. And the White House did respond and basically said, no, Obama's never been part of any secret program. But here is how the timelines supposedly work, and I find it fascinating. So what you all see here is called a world line. And if you ever read a book on time travel from physicists, and there's a lot of good ones, they will always use world lines. So this is essentially a 4-dimensional representation of our lives. So all of us here not being part of any secret government programs, although Fred, I'm not sure about you, but officially not. All of our world lines would look like the bottom line. We start way over at the left as babies, and then as we go on this 4-dimensional line of existence, we get older and older and older. Well, all of these people, whether it's Corey Goode, Michael Ralph, Randy Kramer, they all say the same exact thing. They said as little kids, they were abducted from their bedrooms, not by gray aliens, but by some secret U.S. military force. They were then jumped out to Mars, grew up on Mars, trained as soldiers, and then had a full 20-year enlistment, just like our own military. And then they claim, this is where it gets kind of wild for me, they were jumped back and age regressed. And I'm not sure how the age regression part would work, because according to Einstein's general relativity, special relativity, the only way to go back in time is go faster than light. So that's the only part that I struggle with, but they all say it, and they say they're essentially taken right back to the time they were taken out of their bedroom, so their parents never even noticed they were gone, and then they continued to live their regular timeline this way. So
Did they didn't have, it says like total recall of service and public disclosure, so then this is like how many years later? So what year was all that like? I see the ages, but
right.
like...
Well, So Goode and Kramer came out with this in 2014. Michael Ralph came out 6 years later for this. So I believe from reading some of their accounts, this was taking place in the
later?
1980s.
Hang on, that says 2000, that says 2014.
Yeah, that's when the individuals came public as whistleblowers. Michael Ralph in the year 2000, the other ones in 2014.
Okay, so they came out later.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry if I said it backwards.
That's okay. No, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it since we're talking about time and everything.
Yes.
So they don't remember until this year, or did they know their whole lives that this happened to them?
Oh, that's an excellent question. For a lot of these, some of the memories are through hypnotic regression, and it's very similar to alien abductees. Mm-hmm. So with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, I'm part of a special team called the ERT, Experiencer Resource Team, and those are when you talk to people who have 4th kind encounters or above, abductions. And some of them gradually remember pieces throughout their lives. So a lot of the accounts I get are historical, where the person's much older now, they know something happened, they've started to piece it back together. But then sometimes you'll get things where MUFON actually has certified hypnotherapists in each state that will work with people like this to try to uncover those memories. So I think for all of them, they remembered something about it, and then most of them have gone through hypnotic regression to recover the rest. And
what are their like professions? Like how did they come to this? Like what do they do? Just random people that do other...
I know, like, for example, Andrew Basiago, it's easy to say this dude's totally crazy, but he has 2 doctoral degrees. He has a law degree, He's a board-certified lawyer in the state of Washington. And he actually ran for president a couple elections ago. So, like, anybody can run for president. But, like, if you don't get funding, like, you've got to drop out very quickly. But
Sure.
I read the dude's website on what he wanted to do if he was president, and it would have been pretty legit. So it's too bad that guy didn't get in. So I'm not sure on the backstories for the other ones, but Corey Goode has definitely become famous in his own right in the UFO paranormal field.
Okay.
So just to tie it in, Fred, where are we looking at here?
Oh, it's Denver Airport.
That is
Denver Airport.
So I love the design of the airport. You can see it's supposed to mimic like Native American teepees out there. But do we have secrets hidden in plain sight about underground bases? So Denver is absolutely wild. It opens in 1995, but only after lengthy delays. And one of the ones I find the most curious, they literally started digging for this airport in one location, and then 2 years later said, oh, our mistake. We're digging in the wrong place. Let's cover all this over and go dig in a new place.
Wrong place by who? Like
all the engineers, everybody involved. Oh, wait a minute. We read this map wrong. We're digging in the wrong place. We got to go start over there. And so a lot of people think that's where they were putting in some of the actual infrastructure. So is this just a really huge cutting edge airport, or is this ground zero for the Illuminati and the New World Order? So I mentioned it was delayed for 2 years due to a costly computer baggage system. And I said they started to build it one place and then moved it to a totally different place. So is that just a mistake, or was that actually intentional? Now, the symbolism at Denver is wild. And I even had 2 pilots in my adult evening course, and they didn't know a lot of this stuff was there. So we've got a big Freemason time capsule, which in and of itself is not unusual. Freemasons, you can find the compass and the square on a lot of different government buildings. Freemasons are definitely inexorably tied in with the United States. But here's where it gets weird, is what they have written on it. The New World Airport Commission is not even a real thing. It doesn't even actually exist. And that's written right on the Freemason time capsule.
But why?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows officially. And now, where it gets really weird are the massive murals made from Japanese artist Leo Tanguma, and they have troubling symbolism in them. Now, I'll give you the skeptical side. The skeptics say it's a positive story, and you're just looking at the murals in the wrong order. And they say you're looking at them out of order. So let me show you some of the murals, and you could decide.
what the?
Here we have...
That's at an airport?
Oh, yes. Here we have a bombed-out city and what certainly looks like a Nazi stormtrooper with an AK-47.
A gas mask on.
A gas mask and a sword stabbing a dove of peace.
What the hell?
Here we have children from many different nations all around a glass casket with a Native American and many different animals dying or going extinct. And notice there's caskets to either side, too, of children, while a city is burned in the background. Now, again, imagine you're about to get on an airplane.
Welcome to Denver.
Yeah. You've got some fear of flying, and this is what you've got to walk by. Now, here, you've got a mural. Some say this is the uplifting one. Notice the Nazi foot soldier is now a statue. It's been toppled. There's doves on it. And children from all nations of the world are tying up all of the weapons to have them melted down and destroyed. And then this is the most trippy mural showing all the children of the world around some type of wild, multicolored, trippy plant or flower that's right in the middle of the room. So these are the actual murals. Now, it's not just Denver. I had one of my friends from my adult evening class named Amber, and she said there is a really, really weird display in a forgotten hallway in Dulce in D.C., and she took a picture of it for me, and I shared it to the class.
Arms?
Right? So officially, it looks like there's some primitive farming tools here. But look at the big black thing at the bottom. Is that a loaf of bread? Is that a UFO? How about top middle? Is that a UFO? As Julia said, why are there just disembodied arms? Is that symbolism of the tools they use to do work, or is that something darker? And so there's weird symbolism like this in a lot of airports. Now, we're not even done with Denver. If the murals weren't creepy enough, how about the horse statue that is outside of it that the locals have dubbed Blucifer? And so it's blue, and officially it's thought to symbolize wild Broncos, or the NFL's Denver Broncos, whose colors are blue and orange. So its creator, sculptor Luis Jimenez, was killed when the statue fell over on top of him. So if that isn't a bad omen that you should cease and desist with this statue, I don't know what is. Here's what
God, it's huge.
It's enormous, and its eyes light up bright red.
This is terrifying. Who is going to Denver?
So just imagine, like, you've got your kids packed in, like, the Toyota Sienna.
Come on, guys, let's go hiking. This will be fun.
Yeah, right? Or like, hey, we're going to the airport. We're going to Disney World. Then you've got to drive right by that thing. So some people think it has a much darker meaning, that it's actually representing the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that's revealed in the book of Revelation, which is officially written by John, but probably by somebody else. So some think this is real end time symbolism. One person who absolutely did was William Cooper when he wrote his epic Behold a Pale Horse. Fred, did you ever read it?
I have not. It's on my list of things. And when it came up, I'm like, man, I still haven't read that.
It's wild. It's a wild, trippy ride. I should just get it for you since you got me the Serpo graphic novel one time. But Bill Cooper is another one, was decades ahead of his time. He is killed in a shootout with police who barricaded his house, would not let him out, and he finally gets into a shootout with them and is killed.
Why?
It's a good question. A lot of these people end up getting harassed. And, you know, earlier how we said...
Because of the book he wrote? Like,
yes.
Is that they were just outside of his house? Like, what?
Yes.
What was the official story, though?
It's interesting because when we brought up Paul Hellyer before, and he said, Eric joked like he's still alive, a lot of these researchers think about it, I've probably mentioned this before on our show, think about it like a mountain. They basically say the most dangerous time for your personal safety is when you're going up this side of the mountain. When you're doing good, important things, you're revealing truths, but you're not well known enough. Then, like, once you peak, like, think about, like, the ancient aliens guys. Like, nothing's going to happen to them. Like Paul Hellyer, Hayam Eshed. Bill Cooper, I think, was on his way up. And, like, when you read this book and, like, what he reveals about our government and about how they're using the media, I think they probably wanted to take this guy out before he became more well known.
Picture of this screen so I don't forget.
Yeah, this is a wild, wild, trippy book, and I would say I would put this on the Mount Rushmore of UFO conspiracy books right here. So, just to jump Mars to Denver, how about over to Switzerland? If it was just here in Denver, but this is outside of the CERN particle accelerator in Switzerland.
This is important.
Which shows Shiva, Indian goddess of destruction. Now, officially, according to the Swiss, this was given to them as a gift by the government of India. But I can also say, if people around the world are worried about the power of your facility, if they're worried about the facility causing the Mandela effect, causing rips in time, potentially creating a black hole that swallows the earth, maybe it's not the best idea to put a statue of Shiva, Indian goddess of destruction, outside of it.
So wait, plain devil's advocate here, though. I don't know enough about, like, Indian culture and what their, like, gods and goddesses all mean. Does she help protect against destruction, or does she bring destruction? Like,
well,
what's...
that's an excellent question. She brings destruction, but understand in Hinduism and Buddhism, destruction doesn't have quite the negative connotation that it does in the Western world. Okay. They basically would view destruction as a necessity. Like, the only way you can have new life arise from it is if the previous ways are destroyed. Now, with that being said, I think that the global elite have definitely taken on the negative side of the destruction. But I would say it's not viewed as a negative. What do you think, Fred?
No, it's definitely, it's you have to have a destruction to build upon. But one of the things that I was just looking at is the circle around Shiva, the same as the super collider itself, because it's
Yes.
So can we go on like a little side journey about this whole CERN thing? Because
yes, and I've got more. Go for it.
Okay, good. Because like I just heard something recently that was something to the effect of like, because of how powerful the technology is, that it's like one of the only things in like scientific communities or whatever that has some kind of treaty around it where basically like every nation has the same vested interest in it, and there can't be like international disputes about it or something. I don't know. Am I understanding this
almost
right?
like an Antarctica type thing?
Yeah. Is that true, or do you don't know? Or
I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I would lean towards you being correct. I mean, part of the reason, think about the symbolism of this being built in Switzerland, a country. It's not only at the center of the banking empire, but as Fred said, like traditionally neutral. So I bet you're true. Yes.
Okay.
So where it gets really weird, and I'll give you both sides of this, is some of the engineers and scientists working at CERN, as well as potentially other people, were caught performing a mock human sacrifice in front of the Shiva statue. What? And I have it for you here on video. And I made a note to myself to keep the volume down, but I think that's just because it probably has a swear word, and I've probably used this in class before, at least in my adult class. So I'll put the volume up. So this was reported by the UK-based Guardian. Here we go. So person filming from a window outside of the Shiva statue. Young girl dressed all in white.
What the?
Fuck. So, when this story broke, it caused quite a scandal. Now, officially, some of the scientists at CERN came out and said, we got so tired of people floating conspiracy theories with this that we did this as a joke. Even at Denver, you can now see signs where they've embraced the alien underground base lore. Like, pardon our construction, we're tapping into more tunnels run by the reptilians. They have that.
Yeah, I remember. We talked about that before, right?
We probably did.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me. You want to talk bizarre symbolism? This is the airport layout in Denver. And if you're like, it looks a little bit odd there, it sure does look like a swastika. Now, for my one student in my adult evening course named Mark, he's brilliant. He's been in my course for a number of years. He is a private pilot for a lot of high rollers. And I asked him, I said, Mark, what do you think about this runway design? Like, do you see this a lot? And he said, I'll be honest, it is a very efficient design. It would be efficient. I said, do you see this at a lot of airports? He goes, oh, absolutely not. You never see this design.
So does it actually look like this from above? Like,
oh, yeah.
There's
the picture. There are the actual runways at Denver. That's what it looks like. I just basically overlaid the swastika over it so you can kind of get.
I don't know if I would have, like, if you had shown me without of that.
Right.
I don't know that I would have, like, immediately seen it. That's why.
Okay.
That's why I was asking. Okay.
Yeah. So the last good Denver story I have for you, and this one was on UFO Files on the History Channel. So Denver, this is insane, is twice as large as the second biggest airport in the United States. It covers 53 square miles. Its underground baggage system has officially mostly been abandoned. So they put all that work into it, and then they say, well, this isn't even efficient. This isn't working the way that we want it to. So one day, a traveler accidentally goes down the wrong elevator at Denver, and he taps into this area. So let's learn about the phenomena of alien urinals.
What?
ETF.
Indeed.
And that's Jeremy Ray from Hanger One, the UFO Files. I find stories like that fascinating. It would be so easy for skeptics to be like, yeah, but he took no photographs. He could have totally made up. He could have, but I also think who would make up a story quite like that? So is there something actually underneath Denver? Fred, what's your take on Denver?
I've been there a bunch of times, but I haven't been lucky enough to go through it's always been just a layover. But in the floor, they've upgraded it. From what I understand, they've painted over the murals. They've moved some stuff around, but they have put like different layers of the prehistoric Cretaceous period. Like all these different things. So you see like a lot of seashells. They tried to make it more. I don't know. Sanitized it. Yeah, exactly. But from what I understand out in Denver, the original concrete pipes and stuff they put in weren't just like the normal sized water pipes. They were giant. You could fit a car through them.
Yeah.
Or train through them, et cetera, et cetera. And there was way, way, way more. And then the boxes and boxes and boxes of, I believe it was coffins or like square rectangle boxes that they had there. And that was like one of the early things that they talked about being there at Denver as well.
You saw that a lot during COVID too. There were all those reports of those government plastic coffins that were just showing up all over the place, like they were preparing for some type of mass casualty event, which officially didn't end up happening.
They're storage units for future use.
Yeah, which is pretty wild.
Wasn't it supposed to be like a underground tunnel out of Denver into L.A.?
It goes everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. And funny you bring up L.A. I'm glad you did. Did you all just see about a month ago an underground tunnel had collapsed on workers in L.A. and they had to get to safety, and they said they had to go through 6 miles of underground tunnel till they could get back up to the surface. And so officially, I think it was to add to LA's water system. But a lot of people found it odd because you've got this huge underground tunnel, and the thing about a water system, it should be accessible at many, many points along the system if something goes wrong. So to have to crawl through 6 straight miles just to get back up to the surface. And sometimes in my presentations, I'll throw in postscripts. I call this The Curious Life of Richard Byrd. Fred, do you want to fill everybody in on High Jump? Because I'm sure that you know about it.
I do know about it a little bit, but I'm really not as good as you on like the dates and the so they sent down Admiral Byrd down with a whole fleet armada, yeah. And they go down just to check out. Hey, let's go down and check out Antarctica with all these ships and soldiers and everything else. Now, there's a couple different reasons why. They know that the Nazis had established a base down there, and they were going down to sweep maybe to see if there was anybody still down there. Or the other reason was, could there be bases and aliens and a hole down there that'll take you back to the North Pole, blah, blah, blah. And they went down, they got their asses kicked. To put it easy, to put it light. Was that the one where they guided them in and they told them to leave?
So that was North Pole.
Okay.
When they get here to the South Pole, they said a fleet of anti-gravity discs came up out of the ice, likely German, and with particle beam technology just laid waste to the entire fleet. And what was supposed to be a 6-month-long scientific expedition
was cut way short.
was cut short. Under 2 months, the whole fleet limped back home. And so some think is extraterrestrials. Some think, as Fred said, that was the final Nazi redoubt. And at that point, they basically just had a stalemate with the Allies. The Allies knew they couldn't wipe them out. And so they've just left well enough alone. But it continues to be the most restricted landform in the entire world to this day.
And it's down there in Antarctica. If you want to go, oh, no, you can't. There's no visitors allowed.
No flights over it.
What's the average temperature there?
It's insane. It gets down to 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. I would say the average temperature is probably in the 20s or so, but it's really extreme. The other thing people don't realize about Antarctica, and I try to impress this upon people, the average height of Antarctica is over 10,000 feet high. It gets as high as 12,000 feet. So when you hear about these explorers getting to the South Pole, nobody understands how hardcore that is. It's insane.
Yeah.
You would have to travel with minimal supplies, with like a sled dog team, between 600 and 800 miles from the coastland, over 10,000 feet elevation the entire time. That's like climbing up one of the biggest mountains in Colorado, except then doing that in a straight line, 600 to 800 miles at sub-zero temperatures. So it is truly inhospitable, and it would be the perfect place to hide a massive underground entrance to the Earth.
Is it all ice, or is there actually any walkable land
I'm so
there?
glad you asked that, because in my actual presentation on Hollow Earth, early in the presentation, since so few people know about geography today, I have 2 slides just dedicated to that. The North Pole, there is no landmass.
Right.
It's pure ice. Submarines have gone underneath the North Pole. South Pole, there's a huge landmass that is covered. There are parts where there is no ice and you can see the actual rocks, but on average, the ice there is like 2 miles thick.
It's so thick.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when I think about this is the kind of stuff that actually like makes me a little scared when I think of, because it's like we live here on Earth and this stuff also exists, like these like terribly inhospitable areas of the Earth that like you could just somehow get, like when I think about like space, we always are talking about whether Mars is actually
it's horrifying.
Yeah, but it's like someone could sort of maybe drop you off somewhere like that on this Earth, and it's just, that's so scary to me that like it exists and that people have gone there. Like, why?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, in 2025, it's terrifying how many areas are still truly remote.
Yeah,
that nobody can get to.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Yeah, and the fact that people want to go there, I just
there's that island of natives, right? That are still it's lawlessness, right? And there's been civilized people trying to convert them religiously and have died.
Where?
There's an island, am I
it's
right?
It's in the Indonesia island.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And the government, right. The Indonesian government just leaves them alone, and they exist on this island in a very primitive way, and they have their own thing.
There's even one of the Hawaiian islands that's like that too. Fred, you'll appreciate this. I saw a story recently about that island. Did you know one of the Rothschilds went to that island?
Yeah.
He was like the black sheep, and he just wanted to explore, and he just wanted to convert them.
His whole thing was he wanted to convert them, but he also wanted their artwork. So he was going looking to bring back like totem poles and stuff like that, or because it was selling well. So he went, and I believe that they believe last thing he was seeing was like, I guess, on a canoe, but there were like supposedly photos of a light-skinned man among them, but what they believe is he was eventually eaten.
Oh shit.
Alrighty then.
and it was a Rockefeller, right?
Oh, was it a Rockefeller?
It was a Rockefeller,
not a Rothschild. I think you're right.
Oh, geez. It just goes to show, I feel like there is that like whole like idea about once you reach a certain like pinnacle of wealth that, you got
batshit crazy.
Well, not just that, but that like regular stuff just doesn't do it for you. You're like, well, I've seen all I can see here. Like, I want to go to the.
They think he was going to do. It was like a double thing. He was trying to do like good things, but he also there was the I guess the conspiracy thing was he was looking to acquire museum pieces or something like that. But
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You are right about the wealth thing. I mean, that's why so many celebrities and athletes struggle with the addictions they do, because, most of us regular people, the day-to-day is just survival. Like, can I make enough to pay the mortgage, to feed my wife and kids? But it's like, once you hit that pinnacle and you're beyond all that, I think a lot of life loses meaning. And so they sort of reach for these different, increasingly intense experiences. And I think that's part of the reason that so many of these celebrities struggle the way they do.
Or they break laws, and then they seem, when they're caught, they seem like astounded, like you can't,
prosecute me.
No, they well, because I think they honestly think that, their wealth enables them to live in a fashion that the rest of the people can't. Mm-hmm.
Sure. And in many ways it does. I mean, Alec Baldwin killed that
great example.
person on set.
He sure did.
Or
wasn't that an accident, though?
Oh, yeah.
They don't know?
I mean, I don't think anybody thinks he intentionally was trying to kill the person.
But
he had no beef.
He's guilty of manslaughter.
But yeah, he's completely negligent. Still served no time.
Why is it negligent on his part, though?
He was the producer.
Oh, okay. So, but was he the one that was actually wasn't he the one actually holding the gun, though? Yeah. And so, he didn't have it. He didn't have enough safety measures.
Somebody else put the bullets in the gun, but
he didn't check it, or
and that's a big thing with a lot of these things that you have to have on set strict regulations as to. And I've been on sets where I've seen them broken.
I'm sure.
But what would be the motive, though? That's what I mean, though. It's kind of like
it was just
no. I don't think he intentionally killed her.
Motive.
Well, no, but I mean, like,
responsible.
Do you think someone else did it just to fuck?
No, it was an accident. They were target shooting with that gun.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
Instead using the gun that's going to be, and somebody left a bullet in there, and
I see. Okay, so it's just negligence that he didn't check it.
I believe that's what they were doing. They were target shooting one day with it, or they shot at a target or whatever, and they accidentally. I think that's how the story goes. I'm not 100% positive. Don't sue me.
No,
but,
I was just curious.
But
honestly,
I believe that's what had happened.
I just feel like something like that would just ruin your life in the sense of not even what could happen to you, but if you're any kind of a decent person, you don't
doesn't seem to have ruined his life.
Well, I don't mean that. No, I don't mean on the external. I mean internally.
He gives no indication that he's a changed individual in any capacity.
I'm curious what you see though with some people. You know what I mean? I just don't see why.
We can agree he's a pretty miserable human being, right? I mean, we probably inside him, regardless of the wealth and all that, I think he's generally just a miserable human being.
I don't know. I don't know his story well enough, but I guess I just feel like I don't know. Even if you got away with it, it seems like it would still eat you up inside.
Instead of doing 2 shows, we're just going to do one big show, and this is going to be part 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I don't need to do my outfit change or anything.
You don't.
Wait, so this is part 2 of part 2 now that we're going to confuse.
Well, kind of part 2 of the continuance.
This would be right? 12B little I.
So
darn it.
Interestingly enough,
here we go.
Cut out again.
They don't like us, man.
I'm just curious.
They know that we're here, and the government is jamming us.
I was just gonna say, now that we've messed with this whole space-time continuum thing of the part 2 of part 2,
right?
It's definitely worth considering that,
content.
we're just gonna
do
confuse people. Okay. You're not gonna know what to title this show.
We don't need it.
We had a lot
massive content.
We had a lot of options going into this part.
No, we didn't. We had that last one you said was.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to say. Once I mentioned this one,
we have no options.
So I did my final adult evening class this year. I did them for 10 years straight. I did them through COVID. Fred, you were part of one or two.
I was part of that.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was really awesome.
I loved it. It was great.
Thanks,
it was
man.
It was very, very informative and very well presented.
Thank you, sir. And so I look forward to a year without doing these. I made so many great friends during them, and I learned a lot from my students, but it was a prolific amount of work to try to prepare 9 of these presentations every year.
And on top of your normal work.
Real life.
Yes. And so this one started out as a presentation on AI. And one of my friends, he's a MUFON field investigator with me, Thomas. He has a career in cybersecurity. So he kind of did a part 1 on AI. But he sort of covered it so well, I thought, well, there's no way I can do more than an actual expert in the field. So I drifted more towards nature of our reality. And this one is going to get a little bit trippy here.
Oh, McAfee.
And so we are going to start with John McAfee. And so on the verge of being extradited from Spain to the U.S. to stand trial for tax evasion. And it's always funny that despite all the things somebody supposedly did or what a big threat they are to the government, when they finally got to nail them with something,
it's tax evasion.
Is it Al Capone?
Al Capone.
They tried to get with tax evasion. So he's found dead in his prison cell by an apparent hanging. But a lot of people feel like this was an assassination based on what he was starting to say about our own government. And with the software, the computer background he had, people think that this was really the guy who would definitely know it. So his widow contended it was not suicide. McAfee said he would never do this. And there's a number of people now, they see how prolific intelligence agencies are at assassinating people. So they come out on social media ahead of time. They're like, I'm not suicidal. I would never do this.
Wait, didn't that actor who got caught in Chicago with the whole, he claims he got beat up. The gay actor.
Jussie Smollett.
And Juicy Smollett. Chappelle would say Juicy Smollett. But apparently at his sentencing or his incarceration, he was screaming as he was walking out of the courtroom, I'm not suicidal. I'm not suicidal.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, nothing happened
look
to him,
it up.
though, right?
No, but he was convinced something was going to happen.
That's why he said that.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the only reason.
This is like what we talked about before. On your way up, if you don't make enough waves, they don't notice you. But once you get to that point, but then it still happens even at the.
It does.
And those cats are the cats that really know stuff. They're the movers and shakers that can shake up everything, and they eliminate them. It as well. I just find it funny that that's still around. That they shut people down like that, and it's in plain sight. But it's
probably
always
more than ever now.
It's always a suicide.
Yeah, I was also going to say, if you are a famous person watching and you're about to reveal something, do not tell people you're about to reveal something.
Exactly.
Just go do it. Just go have the press conference and do it, because that's what always happens too. Is these people, they tell their colleagues, they tell their loved ones, like, I'm working on this. It's going to blow the door off everything. Well, it gets intercepted, so they know that you're working on it. Yep. So tell nobody, just do it.
The thing now is if you just put it out there, the internet and you don't need to make a news conference. Mm-hmm. Here's my findings. Here's my facts. Yep. You major players, I've called you here together. You thought we were going to talk about a new breakfast sandwich at McDonald's, but we're really going to talk about, and that's what they should do, because it would still get around. But like you said, these cats put it out there and they end up dead.
Yes, absolutely. So OpenAI, a lot of people are very concerned about AI in general. I also saw people were concerned about Israel's relationship with OpenAI, because people found out, you see the logo there? If you take two of the logos, invert the one, and put them over top of each other, it just makes a big Star of David right in the middle. So this was Suchir Balaji, and so he was with OpenAI on its way up. He helped create ChatGPT, and he said that OpenAI violated U.S. copyright law in its generative AI. And so how this comes about, years ago, there were young people who were sent to jail for life sentences because they were pulling things off different databases and just collecting them. They weren't making their own reports from them, but just collecting them. The databases were proprietary, so they got the book thrown at them. They're still in jail. He is basically saying OpenAI is doing the same thing because it's scouring the entire internet. It's pulling from things that are protected, proprietary. It's doing it anyway. And he also said that AI is being trained using copyrighted images. AI will then take those images and reproduce them on its own, which should be a copyright violation and has always been up to this point. He is then found dead in his San Francisco apartment. And again, his parents claim this was not a suicide. How he was found was strange. And what was also strange, it's a small thing, but when he's found, he had a half-eaten container of ramen noodles at his workstation. And so they're basically saying, like, if you're really going to end your own life and you're going to take yourself out, like, is that really going to be your last meal? Like, I'm just eating ramen, and now suddenly I'm just going to take my own life. And so there's a lot of interesting things about when these suicides actually happen. The other thing that was interesting about this is what they said about AI. And they basically said it's not real like we think it's real. We are mistaking looking at it as true intelligence. In reality, it's just an even faster compiler. It's compiling things together. And they said it's basically a ripoff. One thing that was interesting, and I don't want to play the clip in here, but it's really, really good. Have you all heard of analog horrors? analog horrors are neat. It's this new trend on social media. It's usually younger people doing it that will essentially make a very simply shot horror film. And so one was done about Voyager 3, which was not actually real. There was only Voyager 1 and 2. NASA sent them to explore the outer part of the solar system. They were tremendously successful. They are so far, along with Pioneer 10 and 11, the only physical objects that have actually left our solar system. And NASA is still getting feedback from Voyager 1. And so I have to at least tell you about the analog horror. It's really, really good. According to the horror, there was a secret Voyager 3 mission. And NASA's goal was to send it to other planetary systems beyond the solar system. Now, here's the disturbing part, and this is why I thought it was still relevant. It found a lot of planets, horrifying, used to have human-level advanced life forms before they got destroyed by their own technology. And so, in the Voyager 3 analog horror, it doesn't find any other actual life out there like us. We're it. There was other life, but the scary twist was it all got to the point we're at now and then essentially got destroyed, which I really, really liked. So that was the idea of Voyager 3. Now, the one I want to talk to all you about, and I've been talking about this one for years, even before AI became a thing. Have you all heard of No Man's Sky, or have we talked about this on the show? Oh,
I haven't heard of this.
Good.
Yeah, I got something
This is
new.
really good. This is going to be really, really trippy.
I love it.
I don't like how derisively you said something new. Is it just like
no.
Fred.
Something that I don't know.
Oh, okay, good. So
Fred knows everything.
Something new for me.
Thank you. So 2016, a UK-based gaming company called Hello Games releases No Man's Sky. And I've got a clip in the back, or I've got a picture of it there in the background. It starts out as a space exploration game, and officially it's an MMORPG, which stands for Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. Basically, everybody on Earth who is playing this game is inside the same universe. Now, for 2016, that was fairly new, but it doesn't make it unique. A lot of games today are MMORPGs. Here's where things get wild. To the best estimate of the actual programmers, there are over 18, see that number there? That's 18 quintillion planets. So hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, quintillions. 18 quintillion planets. Now here's where it gets wild. They did not create all of those 18 quintillion planets. You could literally have every human on Earth programming planets all day long for their entire lives, and they could not create 18 quintillion planets. Where it gets wild is they gave a supercomputer the guidelines for this virtual universe. So in No Man's Sky, there is a periodic table that is very similar to ours. They have all of the laws of motion, and physics is just like ours, except you can go faster than light travel in No Man's Sky, so you're not playing your entire life just between two stars. They give a computer the guidelines, and it creates the universe virtually, all on its own. So this is a PlayStation trailer from 2016, and the graphics and the gameplay are even better now. So I tell my students when they watch this, they might think, what's the big deal? It just looks like any outer space game I've ever played. But the big deal is, thanks Eric, aside from the spaceships and the spacesuits that you see, everything else has been created by a supercomputer. So in No Man's Sky, most of the planets have some life forms on them. And the goal here in the game is to discover and name new things that no human has ever actually found before. And I've read the game is so expansive, you could literally play it your entire life and never run into another human being. And so I asked my students that. I was like, is that actually true? And they're like, well, if you're in trading ports, you'll totally see other people. But they're like, yeah, it's so big, you can literally just point your spaceship in one direction and just go, and you'll never find anybody at all. And so what was really unsettling to me is I read an interview with one of the game developers. And he said, I was exploring a planet that the supercomputer had just created. And I was on the coastline. And he said, there are some alien birds flying overhead. So I took my gun, because there's weapons in the game. He said, I took aim, I shot one of the birds, and I watched it fall on a perfect parabolic arc according to the laws of motion. It lands in the ocean and is floating on the water. Then an unknown sea creature jumps up out of the water, grabs the bird, and takes it right back down under. And I just found that really, really unsettling. So the question is, and this is where it starts to get creepy, if we can already make virtual universes with our relatively simple technology, is there a chance a much more advanced civilization has basically made this reality, but like it feels so real, we don't realize that we're inside it?
We're a simulation.
Or is that just where God comes in? Is that where you take your spirituality and just say, God is the original programmer here? So before I go on, I want to turn this one over to you guys. Like, what's your thoughts on No Man's Sky? And does that make you at all uncomfortable with the nature of our own reality?
Okay, I'll go first. I've always thought, not always, but for many, many years since I started paying attention and thinking critically, I've believed that we are in a simulation. And I think it is, I don't know if it was done for entertainment, as we know what entertainment is, but I do think that we are a construct of a physical being somewhere else in space, or how you ever want to define it, and we are either entertainment, or else we were simply created for amusement or for necessity or whatever. But I really think that we have tells. Some of these theoretical physicists have spoken on scientific tells that we are a smear, a two-dimensional smear, living on the edge of a black hole. And that's what we basically are, a simulation. We are not actually, quote unquote, real beyond our concept of reality. That's what I believe.
I'm so glad you brought up the two-dimensional idea. I promise we'll come back to that. Julia, you're always excellent with matters of spirituality and faith. What are your thoughts on this? Does this make you uncomfortable?
I don't know if I'd say excellent on that. So two things. I would say, number one, I don't understand the point of creating a game that's like multiplayer if you're never going to run into anybody else. So to me, that's kind of like, this doesn't really make me uncomfortable. I feel like when I think about what used to make me uncomfortable, or what, like, one of my longest, I'll share this with you. My longest standing fears is, or was, or kind of still is the concept of infinity. And so, like, the idea that numbers never end, or that, like, space just goes on forever. And so, like, if you think about mathematics and just, like, what a computer actually is, like, what I understand on, like, my most basic kind of, like, fundamental understanding, not having any, like, real tech training, that, like, a computer is kind of like a computing machine. So it doesn't really surprise me that it could create something like this if they just kind of turned it over with, like, you know, whatever operating system and, like, you know, computing power, that supercomputer, even if that's the most advanced computer, that could create that. I think one of the things that this touches on for me is, like, I don't know, the idea of, like, simulation theory is very interesting to me, but it's not any more interesting to me than the idea that gravity is a theory, that time in some ways is kind of a theory now. You know what I mean? Like, they're looking at the concept of time as it used to be. They almost looked at it as it was like another dimension. It's like you've got, like, you know, what is it? Like the space.
Space time in general.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, but anyway, so just the idea that, like, you know, time is kind of like where things are happening. And then the longer we kind of bend that perspective, you know, how many things are happening at the same time, all that kind of stuff, you know, just this idea of this, like, sort of like we're talking about malleable reality, but just more of a malleable timeline. I think that is a little bit more intriguing to me and honestly more believable than the idea that we are just a simulation. Almost, what was that movie where they keep ending up on a different couch? Oh, shit.
It wasn't Interstellar, was it?
No, it's like, it's kind of the idea of this like multi-world type of thing. It'll come to me like when
It's not the butterfly effect.
No, it's like it's quirky. I don't know. I'll think of it eventually. Anyway, just the idea that basically I think that there is potentially like one timeline where we're in a simulation, and then there's like, you know, another timeline where we're ethereal beings that don't have bodies, and then like the reality, what I had to like, I kind of, in order for me to exist and not be constantly full of fear and also like not be insane, for me personally, the way that I was able to understand like my own reality and to like kind of come to some kind of peace is basically just that like a lot of this stuff doesn't always, it's not that it doesn't matter, but like I still have to function by the rules of this game, if we want to call it a game or if we want to call it this reality. Okay. So like I still need to maintain my body well enough to maneuver in space. I need to make enough, you know, financial money to like trade for things that I need in this world. And also because I do believe in a spiritual component, it is incumbent upon me to like maintain some level of spiritual fitness. And also like, it's not even like, I don't look at it so much as moral standing, but just like, I need to be able to sleep at night and to maneuver in a way in the world that I'm satisfied with the way I'm treating people around me.
Well, for people out there who don't really buy into the simulation, maybe you'll think differently after the double slit experiment. And I believe this will only be...
what that is?
What's
that? What that is.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, that's physics 101.
I'm glad you do, because I think the only other time we've talked quantum physics is the very first time I was here, and it was you and me, and I was like, "Wow, this dude really knows his stuff."
No,
oh yeah,
this
is like quantum stuff, right? Where like
is it a particle or is it a wave?
Yeah, particle, and simultaneously depending on how you're observing it.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Or if you're observing
it. Yeah.
Oh, you guys are ready for this one. This is awesome.
You're in the right room.
This is great. So, 1801, Thomas Young shows light behaves like a wave. It isn't until over a century later they repeat that for electrons, and they show electrons are behaving like waves as well. So they start to link together the fact that electrons are equivalent to photons, which are waves. Now, this is all done well before quantum physics is established. Now, here's where things start to get weird. Later experiments after this showed that matter and then electrons were behaving like particles and waves at the same time. So you might think, well, how in the world are we going to link that to video games, especially, you know, a half a century before video games came out? So here's where things get really unsettling. Young showed that when the light was passing through two slits instead of just one, it showed an interference pattern just like water waves. So essentially, think of these being water waves. You throw two stones in two different places in standing water. The advancing wave fronts start to meet each other and interfere. If you look at the far right, that's the pattern that you actually get. So it's showing that light isn't just a stream of photons, it's also a wave. So far, so good. Here's where things start to get really weird. When scientists have the ability to start shooting individual atoms through the slits, and then later, in 1960, they got good enough to do it with single electrons. Yep. Here's where things start to get weird. If light is acting like a particle, what they should have seen on the screen were two strips of light, because those are the only places where it could actually pass through. So instead of a photon gun, pretend it's like a tennis ball cannon. Mm-hmm. Every time it hits into the screen or the net, the ball bounces back. There's only two places where the tennis balls can actually get through. Now, here's where it gets pretty weird. So you get this interference pattern because it's actually acting like waves. So you get the full pattern like I showed you earlier. Now, here's the really, really wild part. Here's the two-slit experiment with lasers. But what they started to find was when they were firing single electrons. Now, follow me here because this is the super important part. If you're firing single electrons, you should have only seen this. Instead, you still got the same exact interference pattern. And what was even weirder, and this is the significant part, is the act of observing it altered the photon behavior. So when they were watching the photon gun, it did this like you would expect. When the scientists weren't watching and when they turned the detectors off, then you got the wave-like pattern. And this opens up a lot of weird questions. Why is the act of observation important? And why does it only seem to be a human observation? Like maybe there could be a fly in the room, but there's bacteria in the room. Nothing else in the room observing it seems to matter, only the human observation. Now here's where very unsettlingly this links to video games. This has been done in video games for decades, and I want to show you exactly how that works. As soon as I show you this clip, you're going to be like, yeah, I get it. So in a video game, the observer, your player, is right here. What they do in video games to be able to make them larger, or back when we were young, to essentially fit them on a single cartridge, is only the area that the player, the gamer, is looking is actually getting rendered. When he or she isn't interacting with that area or observing that area to save computing power, it's no longer being rendered. The person in the game doesn't know it because everywhere they look, the world is quickly rendered around them. But they are basically living in a false reality.
And we assume the rest is already there.
Yes. And so the unsettling nature about the two-slit experiment, and I'm sorry if I didn't explain it well enough, I want to get better at it, but it seems like there is some memory-saving application to our own reality where when things are being observed by humans, it'll represent itself a certain way. But when we're not
we
watching,
deem to be logically.
which we deem logically, but it seems like when we're not watching, it goes into some memory-saving mode. And this almost seems to also answer the age-long paradox of if a tree falls in the woods without anybody around, does it make a sound? You could almost argue now, no, it doesn't make a sound because the universe is saving its memory for when we're around.
Yeah, it's not observed, right?
Yes.
So it's not, so that goes deeper. Is anything that we actually didn't observe? Did any of that really happen?
Yes.
Huh. That could get me out of a lot of trouble. I'm going to use that one.
So, I mean, does the next one we're going to talk about is a doozy. Does anybody have any? I mean, you guys were ready for the two-slit experiment.
Brian Greene was my tutor, physics-wise. Yeah, all just too many Brian Greene documentaries 10, 15 years ago.
I used to get high and listen to my friend's dad talk, who was a scientist.
Physicist,
he was just a scientist, yes. That's what he did like for work. But I think it's the first thing I thought of, interestingly enough, was like, is it any wonder why we have such a aversion to like surveillance? Because if you think about it, like how do we behave when we know we're being observed versus how do we behave when we know we're not? And there's like, the whole idea of that's how you can tell if someone's a really good person.
Yeah, the character question.
But not just that. I think there's like a deeper level of like freedom to be concerned with that, because it's like if there was a time, and there's this whole idea of this like fascination that younger people have with the 90s, this whatever, because it was like one of the last,
it was the Wild West,
observable time periods, so they can observe it because there is some documentation of it, but the people were behaving in a way as if they weren't always being observed. And you can see this kind of like relaxation and freedom and sort of just this like peace in a way that people have that I think people now are struggling with, because there's this idea now that anything you do at any time is like.
Do you feel that when you go out? Like, are you conscious now when you go out that there's cameras potentially everywhere? Are you conscious of that? Do you think about that?
I am. I'm still lucky enough to live in a more rural area, but where it hits me, every now and then, I'll go on a walk and I'll leave my cell phone at home, and it feels like a great act of rebellion. Mm-hmm. Or I'm still really, really big into physical music and video. Mm-hmm. I still buy DVDs because like nobody wants them anymore. I'll buy them up like crazy. And sometimes if I'm like working on carpentry or a job in the basement, I just have this little TV. I bring it down, put the DVD in, and it feels like a great act of rebellion to me because I'm like, nobody knows what I'm watching now. They can't inject ads. They can't follow me.
You're not connected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Off the grid.
Yeah, I think it's just there's something about like, I don't know, the way people interact now, and this, like, it's almost like you don't want to not, because even before I had a phone all the time, I still took a lot of pictures. You know what I mean? Because it was like, I was with my friends. It was like something that was like, it made me happy, but it was like just for me, and it made me happy just because it was just for me. And it was like, there was something, and I think that's why when people, like, especially young people now see those like photos and images, like they see this different, like,
of course,
thing about it, because it's like people were just like excited to be
in a different state.
Yeah,
they were in a different state.
They
of
were
mind.
with like their social circle.
Yes.
They know that they like their thought was like, you know, this is maybe just going to end up in someone's photo album, like on their bedroom floor. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be on the internet. It's not going to, you know, come back to haunt me in 10 years. It's not going to, you know, my future husband isn't going to see what I'm doing. You know, just whatever dumb things people worry about. You know, like,
I think we're posing for everything.
Well,
now.
and
I mean, really, even like we just did it. We just posed for a photo, and I guess you're always going to smile and all that, but the reality is that's a microcosm of how we're actually living our lives all the time. Sitting right here, we know that hundreds or thousands of people are going to see and watch and listen. So, you know, we're trying to put our best foot forward for that, right?
Yeah. And there's currency in that too. And there always has been like a certain, you know, like clout in numbers as far as like, you know, whatever popularity or like reach someone might get. But now we have all these like data points for it, and everyone has access to it. And, you know, there's like a status associated with it and all this stuff. And like, I don't know, like I feel like if you don't engage in any way, it's almost like there's this way that you could be like not left behind, but kind of like
maybe
I don't know. I mean, honestly, like there is part of me that would be happier, like probably like just, you know.
What's funny is as she said that, I was sitting here. That's what I was thinking, that I'm the least informed about this topic in the group, and I'm like, and my exact thought, literally seconds before you said it, was, you know, I am so, you know, left behind on this because I have no.
You're disconnected.
Disconnected on, yeah, but that's, you know, I mean,
which is awesome.
Which is my own thing. But I that's what I was thinking, and you said it, that, you know, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty great. But what's weird, it's not the first time that it's happened in this discussion. As I'm sitting there thinking of these things, and somebody else says it ahead of time, and I was like watching the video because I don't play video games.
I don't either.
So I don't know anything about. And so this is fascinating to me, and I'm stuck in these deep thoughts, and I'm having like all these. I'm like going crazy different places, and I relate to the electron and, you know, the experiment thing. So I got that, but then I'm like starting to think, well, what if this and what if that, and it's the whole observation thing. It only happens when you're, and I started thinking, you know, that is, and it's what we're talking about. You know, it's all when we're being observed, and that's only when it turns on. And so I'm really enjoying this.
Well, but you could make a case though that like in some ways, like you have like a bigger profile than any of us just because of the work you've done and all that kind of stuff. I have observed that in a lot of people just that I've come across throughout like my life, is that sometimes the people with like the most like the most direct doorway into something like that, they're like the least like worried about it, kind of, you know what I mean? Because it's kind of, you're just like, it's a part of your life that you're living anyway, like in a way, like you're in show business, so it's like that's how you make a living. So it's kind of like, why continue to engage in like all these other like superfluous areas of it? You know what I mean?
But you see other people on that level that they do it, but it's just like, for me, it's I don't know. I'm happy trying to be normal, but it's nice to, you know, to see this technology and see this stuff out there. It's amazing.
Well, I think it's very easily what you just said is very easily identifiable if you take a look at aging rock stars. It's rock stars that had in the 70s, 80s, and 90s had a pretty big presence and have made a lot of money. A lot of them have not what you would consider fully grabbed onto posting every day and this immediacy with their fans. They take their shots every week or month, but they're just comfortable with the life they remember.
Yeah.
And they have all the money. They don't need to. They probably view what you just said. Everybody's rushed to get attention. I already have it. I don't need to play that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do think you will potentially see a return to the wholesomeness of the 1990s,
I hope.
but out of necessity. What's going to happen, and it already is government overreach through our devices and monitoring is so relentless and so nefarious, and it's getting to the point where there are real life consequences for people. Like in Great Britain, people are already being jailed for speaking out against the government.
On social media.
I just read yesterday, this was very upsetting to me, that Ford Motor Company is looking into how to basically use your cell phone, which can record your rate of speed, in conjunction with cameras on other cars. They can get secondary verification of your car, where you might now just get speeding tickets directly in the mail. And it'll get to the point you won't be able to exceed the speed limit. And if that sounds like a stretch, it's not. In China, in all the major cities, your phone is synced with exactly who you are. If you jaywalk in one of these major Chinese cities, the Chinese have more facial recognition cameras than anybody else on earth. Police officer doesn't come up to you. You just get a notification on your phone that suddenly $100 was subtracted from your account for jaywalking. So what I really see,
that is horrifying.
What I see happening is it is going to become so relentless and so insidious. A lot of people, at least my age and older, are just going to eventually be like, you know what, the heck with this. I'm leaving this at home. I'll turn it on when I need to. Or there are companies now that sell mini Faraday bags, which is essentially just...
Do they work?
Yes. I think you could basically make your own by taking, you know, that copper mesh insulation, putting it all around the inside of a bag, turning your phone off and dropping it down in, where they make those where people just want to be off the grid. And so I think what's going to happen, it'll almost be like colonial times. Like when our founding fathers wanted to talk about the British, they would get together in some secret tavern and like talk in hushed tones.
Like the mob.
Yeah, I think people are actually going to go back to like handwriting things and like passing them to each other. And I think it's coming, but only out of necessity it's coming.
Well, and that's, I think, going to be like almost like you're talking about like how it feels rebellious to watch a movie on analog or whatever. I think that is actually going to be a new form of like, I don't even want to say social currency, but it's almost going to be like before we had this like you're talking about climbing up the mountain. Like there's this period of time where everyone's trying to build a profile. Everyone's trying to get the reach out. Everyone's doing this. And then you realize like what actually kind of comes of that and what you're giving up and like kind of like the privacy that you're releasing out to do that. And there's always like types of business that you have to engage in, you know, you don't have to, but that maybe people choose it. If you're a more extroverted person, like, you know, I wouldn't have gotten my real estate license if I was like a super shy person. You know what I mean? And so like people have always gravitated towards different types of career pathways based on, you know, personality types. That's normal. But I think some of what we were experiencing now with like how much we share of our personal life is just, it's making things like feel less authentic. And I think that people are going to start having these like really authentic experiences in art and music, in, you know, their own personal family lives, social gatherings that are sort of like phones free. You know what I mean? Like, and because there's come to like this point where it's like kids hang out in person on their phones. You know what I mean? Like literally, like you go to like a party. I've heard people talk about going to parties and like literally like everyone's just sitting there on their phone. And I think everyone knows there's something wrong with that. You know what I mean? These
they?
I do. I think these kids do understand. And what I actually read this whole article that was talking about how part of like the online movement with children came out of like helicopter parenting, in the sense that like, you know, when we were younger, we just got to go out and play with our friends. And like, you're not allowed to, like, they've made it so that and for good cause, because enough kids got swiped up in, like terrible things happened to enough kids.
Did the government orchestrate the change into helicopter parenting?
I don't know. But like I read this, the article I read basically said that it's almost, the chance of your child actually getting abducted is actually fairly low. But because of what a horrible thing it is, you would never even want to take any kind of minuscule chance. And so you hear enough stories like that, like kids aren't even allowed to go in their front yard to play without being observed a lot of times. And so one of the reasons they've retreated to online spaces is it's one of the only places they can be without parental supervision. And again, coming back to like this whole particle observance and all this stuff, I think there is this like innate freedom in knowing that you're being unobserved. You know what I mean? And again, it's like, yeah, like there's the whole moral thing of like, are you behaving? The parental guidance. Yeah. And that's all important. But there's also like the freedom of just being uninhibited, to not
untethered.
Yeah. Not feel like you're constantly having like someone looking over your shoulder. And I think that is one of like the sad things that's happened as a result of, parents being like a little overly protective after being like maybe underly protective for a while, where they, like maybe
Gen X, that's how I was raised. It was the Wild West.
That's what I mean. And,
am I right, Fred?
And I don't know if that's, I don't know that that's the best either. I really don't.
At times it wasn't.
It wasn't. We romanticize this freedom that we have, and I think that there is something to that. But I also think that like, I don't want to say it's negligent.
The ones that survived, were lucky.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is something to that, but then there's also, like, is there a borderline of like lack of attachment? You know what I mean? Or there's some psychological things that might have occurred as a result of not having enough interaction with a parental all those things. But then do you overcompensate, and then you're constantly, like, I don't know.
It is funny what you said about retreating into the safety of online spaces. Did you guys see what controversy Roblox just got themselves into?
When she was saying it,
someone explain to me what that is.
I've been hearing.
What is Roblox?
Yeah. So my one daughter plays it, and it's another MMORPG where everybody in the world is in Roblox, but there's all kinds of different side games in Roblox, and most of them are pretty safe, but there's also some creepy ones. There's like one that's like a virtual bathroom simulator, and like you go in and like all these other characters can come in and out. Well, the controversy came because there's this teenager who is very, very aware of this app being used for sex predators and trying to get kids to reveal information about themselves, putting themselves in these weird scenarios where you're in a virtual bathroom with other kids. And he has succeeded in busting 6 sex predators in Roblox. It's Roblox, Roblox. So you'd think he would be praised as a hero. Roblox sends him the cease and desist letter. Stop targeting these predators in our app. You're making this negative news for us. And they threaten legal action against him. To the kid's credit, he just put them on full blast on social media. And now there's this enormous backlog against them. I just brought it up really quickly because you had mentioned, and I think you're right, like, well, my kid can just be on the computer instead of the front yard. That's safe. But sadly, in our world today, like, that's not even safe either.
No, and I agree. I think it's honestly in some ways less safe.
Yes, at
but
this point.
but if you're looking at like why it's happened, I think is some of that is, it's worth considering. I'm not necessarily going to like let my child just like wander off into the street, but I also feel like there's something to be said for that too.
So this one's pretty wild. Holographic universe. And I think I can explain this one pretty well. This is a newer idea, but mainstream physics is taking it very seriously. In fact, for the last number of years in astronomy, when we talk about what's going to happen to the universe someday, I give the possibilities to my students, big freeze, big crunch, but I also include holographic universe. I just lay it out there for them. So this idea is now 25 years old. And so the important thing to understand the significance here is to understand what exactly a hologram is. And this is going to get into what Eric said at the beginning about the universe basically being flat. So the strict definition of a hologram is an appearance of more dimensions using less dimensions to actually pull it off. So if you look in the example at the right, it's a hologram of a 3-dimensional sphere. But if you look at its origin at the bottom, it's really just a projection through a two-dimensional surface. And so you're probably all old enough, Julia, maybe not you, but maybe you. I still remember these from the 1990s. I didn't have one, but in the 90s, as video games were coming out, they were messing with all different types of ideas. Like you had games where you wore goggles, you had early precursors to like virtual reality, but this was another one. And I remember playing this game at Chuck E. Cheese. Yep. It was called The Time Traveler. And so what you see around you was what looked like three-dimensional objects, but you could put your hand in front of the projector. It was actually just a projection from a two-dimensional surface. And so people thought that this was the wave of the future, but it didn't end up actually happening. So the idea, how do we relate this to video games? Our four-dimensional appearance could be a holographic projection of a lower dimension reality. And if that sounds like a stretch, I promise I've got the receipts to back this one up. So it actually reconciles very, very well with the concept of heaven or the afterlife. I am fascinated by near-death experiences. I have books on them, and it's phenomenal to me that literally tens of billions of people have died here on the earth during the time of modern civilization, and we still don't have a good official handle on what happens after the fact. So I love these stories about people who are biologically dead and then brought to life. And there are some commonalities in all of these stories. Number one, heaven is absolutely real. So all of these cases I read, nobody says I died and then there was just nothing. But what's also fascinating is time as we know it does not really exist, and our reality is surprisingly flat. This comes up consistently, and it made me think of this hit movie from a couple years ago, Everything Everywhere All at Once. So this was 2022. It was comedy, and it depicts a multiverse where every individual choice creates a new universe. Yep. And so the heroes in it are jumping between the different timelines. And what's fascinating to me is people who have near-death descriptions of heaven, they're identical. They basically say, I could see the whole universe. It essentially looked like a flat rotating disc. They always say it's rotating. And they say, I can't even quite put it into words, but it was like all times and all events were all happening exactly at once. Yep. This also comes up, quite unsettling, in the idea of alien abductions. There have been a number of cases, and this is super weird to me. People are describing gray aliens, but they describe them as unnaturally thin or flat. And that doesn't, this is important, that doesn't just mean diminutive in size. There are a number of encounters where people say it was so weird because they literally looked like flat objects, but they had no depth to them, but they were actually interacting
like
with
a projection.
Like a projection. And so for our next video, we're going
Flatland.
Old
I was just going to ask you about Flatland.
Yes.
I was just going to ask you about this. Is crazy. I had to watch this in science class in like the 9th grade when this came out, because PBS ran this regularly, and it was part of the curriculum that was put into public schools, of course.
Yes.
And that is, what's his name? Sagan. But when you're in 9th grade, it's a really difficult concept. And there was a full-length movie, too. Wasn't there a full-length Flatland?
Full-length Flatland. I think you're right. I was going to talk about the actual original Cosmos was a 13-part miniseries on PBS based on Sagan's book. Yes.
Now, that would have been around 80, right?
Yep, it was 1980.
Okay,
yep.
But the Flatland was his... I'm telling you, there is an instructional or instructional animated movie called Flatland.
I am sure you're right about that, and I want to see it. What I can share with you...
It's hard to... At that age, it was hard to conceptualize.
Yes. So this is Sagan's introduction into Flatland.
In discussing the large-scale structure of the cosmos,
turn it up just a little bit.
Astronomers sometimes say that space is curved, or that the universe is finite but unbounded. Whatever are they talking about? Let's imagine that we are perfectly flat. I mean absolutely flat. And that we live, appropriately enough, in a flatland. A land designed and named by Edwin Abbott, a Shakespearean scholar who lived in Victorian England. Everybody in flatland is, of course, exceptionally flat. We have squares, circles, triangles, and we all
Could we pause for a second?
Absolutely.
Just pause for one second.
Go into our
So here's the thing I couldn't grasp as a kid. When you think of something flat, you think of a piece of paper and all that. But in my mind, I'm going, it's still's got some kind of three.
Yeah.
Okay. So what he's basically asking these young people to do is to grasp the concept of two dimensions,
Yes.
which our mind cannot rectify as something we understand.
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
theory.
Yes.
But to an 8th or 9th grade person, and that was our problem. We were still thinking, well, there's still a level of depth to anything that we consider
paper,
flat in our
yeah.
Yes.
exactly. And I don't think he does. I don't think he does enough to try to explain what I just did, and that's why I think the youth didn't get it.
That's a great observation. And then even more primitive than this is line land. Line land is a one-dimensional existence where you can only move back and forth. Here you can move across a surface. Line land is just back and forth. And one of the weird things about flatland, because it's not just Sagan, any physics time travel book you read will have this. In flatland, you can't have a digestive system. And this is weird, but think about this. We eat here, we go to the bathroom down here. If that goes the whole way through the body, the organism would be cut into two totally different pieces. So, long story short, it has like weird consequences only living in a two-dimensional world. Now, let's stick with this because where it's going to get wild is when Sagan tries to introduce a three-dimensional apple into flatland.
Yes. Scurry about and we can go into our houses and do our flat business. Now, we have width and length, but no height at all. Now, these little cutouts have some little height, but let's ignore that. Let's imagine that these are absolutely flat. That being the case, we know, us flatlanders, about left-right, and we know about forward-back, but we have never heard of up-down. Let us imagine that into flatland, hovering above it, comes a strange three-dimensional creature which, oddly enough, looks like an apple. And the three-dimensional creature sees an attractive, congenial-looking square, watches it enter its house, and decides in a gesture of interdimensional amity to say hello. "Hello," says the three-dimensional creature. "How are you? I am a visitor from the third dimension." Well, the poor square looks around his closed house, sees no one there, and what's more, has witnessed a greeting coming from his insides, a voice from within. He surely is getting a little worried about his sanity. The three-dimensional creature...
Okay, now quick pause. Before you see his next visual from Sagan, pretend the apple is a UFO and we're all the flatlanders.
is unhappy about being considered a psychological aberration, and so he descends to actually enter flatland. Now, a three-dimensional creature exists in flatland only partially. Only a plane, a cross-section through him can be seen. So, when the three-dimensional creature first reaches flatland, it's only the points of contact which can be seen, and we'll represent that by stamping the apple in this ink pad. And
Now, to me, this part was very, very compelling because when people talk about UFOs, they always talk about UFOs changing shape. And so when I saw this, it made me think, could UFOs be a higher dimensional phenomenon when they're trying to come down into our four-dimensional reality? Our brains are trying to make sense of it and we can't. So if you look what ink has been left, that is the nature of an apple in flatland. But I think we'd all agree those 4 points there don't even come close to representing what the apple really is. If anything, it's deceiving you because an apple doesn't really look anything just like that. And so I wonder whether with not just UFOs, but spirituality, all of these higher end concepts that, as Julia mentioned, seem to be like threading back together, like the buckets are spilling over onto each other. I wonder if this is part of our difficulty, is the majority of these things are involving additional dimensions. And we're so trained just to live in a 4-dimensional mindset that we're trying to describe it based on our limitations, and it's sounding totally preposterous.
I just listened to something else recently that was talking about like your senses and how like we're aware of 5 senses, and then you talk about a 6th sense, and that's like when things get a little like, spiritual or whatever you want to call it. But then the lady, she was a neuroscientist, was talking about how there's actually like 32 senses or something like that. Wow. She didn't go through all of them, but basically we're not accessing them for the most part. Like the human brain's capable of it, like the human body's capable of it, but like it's not something that we access normally.
It's that pineal gland, Fred. It's been calcified.
You weren't watching the CEO podcast, were you? And it was that Indian doctor?
Yeah. I went back and listened to her original episode they kept referencing on that one. It's pretty good. Like the most recent one, I felt like they hinted towards that they were going to really like share some kind of like thing. And she didn't really have like tangible evidence, but I think what she's trying to explain is like, I think she's limited by language to explain something that really is this like extra, spiritual phenomenon. And then if you go back and listen to the original episode that she was on, all the stuff she talks about with like when she's talking about neuroscience, she's very, very knowledgeable. And like that episode was really fascinating. And there was like a lot of tangible stuff that you could actually like use in your day-to-day life to like use your own like neurochemistry to your advantage kind of. So I think when she's speaking in like the realm of the physical world that she's educated in, that she can like talk in, she's very articulate, but then she's trying to explain this concept that I don't think she really has.
Metaphysical, yeah. She's also grieving for her husband.
Yeah.
And the pushback is that she is entering this metaphysical dream state because she's grieving for her husband.
Yeah. And I totally understand that. I think also that she's just limited by her own like ability to conceptualize it and to like articulate it, whereas other people that's kind of their main thing is the metaphysical might have actually like had a better episode and given people more to like really go on. That was just my take on it. But yeah, I think we have more senses than what we're using still.
I agree. So later in the Flatland simulation, he takes a translucent 3-dimensional cube. I thought this was interesting too. He shows how the projection of the cube can make a shape that the Flatlanders can interact with. But just assuming that's the nature of the cube totally belies its actual structure.
Do you guys remember learning how to draw those when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Wasn't it like the coolest thing you ever learned? Like when you actually learned how to draw a cube?
Yes.
I don't know about you. I was like stunned. Like I drew them constantly because I just thought it was friggin' fascinating.
Well, us 90s kids, was it the Stussy S? What was the S that like...
Oh yeah, that make it look like a dollar sign or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't get that one as well. Like the cube was probably the I remember learning how to do that one, but by then it was like I wasn't as into it. But it was so popular.
We were on vacation and we were just like eating at a Sonic down in Tennessee, and like kids had chalk there, and somebody had drawn that like.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, somebody still got it.
Yeah.
So I guess if the universe was really created this way, if it's a lot more similar to a computer program or a hologram. I asked my adults, does that change the nature of God for you? Or do you just kind of shift perspective a little bit and think of God as the original programmer? It doesn't bother me because I almost feel like this dates back to the classical Greeks. The Greeks were really the first who thought that the gods created the universe to be knowable. Like it wasn't meant to just be a mystery. We weren't meant to just kind of like grope about blindly our entire existence. We were meant to know it. But now that we're sort of starting to get hints of the underlying programming, does that make God less powerful than he is? Or does that kind of bring us closer to God? Like, okay, we're getting advanced enough now. We can at least start to understand how you built all of this.
No, I still think it kind of comes back to like that God within you sort of thing, like which is like not a new concept.
Great.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Getting some Far Side comics in too.
I really enjoyed that. I had to like read every little jar that he had.
So there's another possibility, and it's terrifying. Is there a chance God set this all up to run perfectly in theory, but then something else is keeping us trapped here. So I call this soul trap. And so when you look at near-death experiences, there are an uncomfortably high number of them that talk about their soul lifts up, it floats above the earth, they can start to see all of creation, they feel a oneness with humanity, but then suddenly they feel a tug and something is wrong, and they feel themselves getting pulled towards the moon of all things. They then essentially get recycled, and it's not that heaven isn't real, but it's not a be-all, end-all eternal harmony with God. It's essentially like an R&R. You go there, you have your life review, you see what worked, what didn't work, where your soul can improve, and then you're essentially thrown down the pipe right back here and you're reincarnated here. And what's fascinating to me is a number of experiencers essentially describe being frustrated that they're trapped in this cycle. They know at some deep inherent level they're not from here, and they have this desire to go home, which is elsewhere in the cosmos. And what I have down at the bottom is what some people believe is a tower on the moon. And there's been a lot of debate about it. Now, the two pictures on the bottom, some people say this is a three-dimensional tower casting a shadow. NASA says, no, it's a smaller crater beside a larger crater, giving the incorrect appearance of a tower. But what you have at the top, I've shown multiple times on this show. The Soviets photographed this with their Zond 3 space probe in preparation for landing eventual cosmonauts on the moon, which officially never happened. That's the Tower of Babel. The low-end estimate is that it's 3 to 4 miles high. Wow. The high-end estimate, 22 miles high, sticking up off the moon. And so if any of you watching or listening are into this stuff, these books are the two best books that you absolutely want to read. The one here is called Cosmic Voyage. It's by Dr. Courtney Brown. He is one of the first remote viewers to try to take this from a non-military application to something anybody could do. Early in the book, he spends the first couple chapters just talking about how you can try remote viewing at home. So he has very similar tales in there. The one on the left looks totally trippy and new agey, and in a way it is. It's called Talking to Extraterrestrials by Lizette Larkins. But what's fascinating to me, even though new agey stuff has been shunned as non-scientific, it's interesting to me how closely the realms of quantum physics and high-end physics are kind of going backdoor in that direction anyway. So these are the two books that you definitely want to read. So with a soul trap, that definitely conjures up to me one of, I think, the best, most thought-provoking movies ever made, Truman Show. Have you guys all seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So in this scene, Jim Carrey, the main character, the protagonist, starts to notice something is odd when a floodlight from the much bigger soundstage ends up falling down on the ground and nearly killing him. So the backstory that he doesn't know, he's adopted by birth from the motion picture studio. He's lived 30 years on a gigantic soundstage, which he has incorrectly conflated with reality. All of his friends and his family are just the actors trying to maintain the illusion, and it's all carefully engineered with Truman inside of it. And so then eventually he realizes the entire thing is a simulation. He reaches the edge of his reality, or we could say the edge of the video game, and he sees there was stairs and an exit all along, but it was painted so perfectly he didn't actually see it. So then as he goes out the door, he says to the massive TV audience that's been following him his whole life, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So a lot of people thought that was a pretty apt metaphor for what we might actually be experiencing right now. I mean, I could have gone the cliche route and gone with the Matrix here, but I kind of went like the more wholesome way with the Truman Show.
Yeah. Would you not agree that there are a considerable amount of theoretical physicists today in 2025 that have adopted the concept of the simulation theory?
Yes.
More and more. Even deGrasse Tyson, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's not, before show we talked about all of these alien encounters that have been in mainstream media. It's so in your face that I almost think, what are they setting us up for? Like a Project Bluebeam. This, to me, has come about more organically. Like, the mainstream media isn't covering it.
It's come from science.
Yes. And so unless you go looking for it, you're not really going to see it. So that, to me, tells me there's a higher level of legitimacy to it. It's not just the next psyop that they're trying to get you with. Yes.
Or is it like the ultimate psyop because you don't see it
could
coming?
Be.
It could be.
And again, like, wouldn't that be what this is? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That to me is just like a thought loop. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like this thing where because then if that's what you believe, like if I believe that my life is the Truman Show, and who's to say it isn't, but like if I live my life as such, like what meaning does anything have? And you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so like, to me, it's like, again, it's not like it doesn't matter. And it's not like I don't believe it, but again, like I still come back to the idea that I think it's simultaneously happening with all this other stuff. Because if you really believe that time isn't real, like which is kind of provable through physics too, that like time, it's not that it's not real, but it's a man-made concept. But it's not, concept. It's not linear. You know what I mean? And it's not a timeline. It's more
it's like a loaf of bread.
Timelines, yes, exactly.
We're just moving through the loaf, right? Yeah. The past is still there. The future is out in front of us. Right. It's already. Maybe is it predefined? I don't know. Let me throw this at you. I thought of this when I was in high school. I swear to God to you. And I thought I was losing my mind because I went down a rabbit hole in 83. But I always thought to myself, isn't it interesting that the human lifespan 70 to 80, 85, right? And
I'm going to live into my 90s.
And it's me too. It just but it just like our society and our world of human experience just keeps rolling through with new blood all the time because no one lives hypothetically past 100, right? So it's a constant evolution of new blood all the time. Is that really, and we've just progressed to this point, is that really how it is, or is all of that happening, but orchestrating the whole thing and keeping everything on a correct course are beings that are around for, in terms of our scale of time, like either forever or for long periods of human time, that are orchestrating and keeping the flow of the human experience moving in a certain direction. I don't want to give humans enough credit that we cannot kill each other or kill our experience on our own. I just don't know if we are sophisticated enough beings to have done this continual roll of progress and existence on our own without the puppeteer above just guiding, putting the guidelines in. I just feel that we are being, for us to continually exist, I think we have to be manipulated by a higher being.
You're setting me up so well for this. If you look at our next slide. So this is what the ancients would call the archons or so, which are clearly laid out. And so this took a wild twist with my adults, but I wanted to go this way. And what's funny is there are a number of things out there where, flat earth, firmament, like you initially look at it somewhat mockingly. But when you start to look into it, you're like, okay, even if I don't totally buy it, I at least get why people do buy it. Like, there's enough here, I can see what makes people think. And so one of the ideas with this soul trap, or as Eric said, do we have the puppet masters? Are we allowed to have free will here on Earth? As you mentioned, like, you could take somebody's life. But the overall course is dictated by it. And so this has become, I would say, a renewed conspiracy on social media. It's almost like there is so little trust now in governments, in the media, in officialdom. You are seeing this entire new wave of people reevaluating what they've been told. And so there's a lot of renewed discussion about the firmament on the opening pages of the book of Genesis. Now, me personally, Catholic my whole life, my faith very important to me. I never really took issue with this. At the time, people wouldn't have understood gravitational pull. They wouldn't have understood the planet was a sphere. They wouldn't understand how the air was being held to the planet. I essentially thought this was in there just to give people a sense of, okay, God's created everything. This is why we have water. This is why we have the sky. But people today are taking this much further. Was this a literal description of our reality? So before people understood that the earth was round, or at least most people understood, these were the types of descriptions and drawings you would get of the earth. You would get the solid ground, the physical ground on which we live, the underworld below it, usually associated with hell. Then you would get this firmament above it on which the moon, the sun, all the stars were actually attached. And then in the Middle Ages, you have the idea of like our visionaries, like Copernicus and Galileo, essentially being able to be the first who could breach the firmament and peek through to show that we're part of something much bigger. Now, I'm going to make an analogy here. When you think about the Earth on the whole, is there a chance we are essentially being used like a prison planet? Because what remote viewers consistently show us, what people who have near-death experiences consistently show us, is that we are essentially a rogue planet, an outlaw planet. This is where all the undesirables have essentially been dropped. And so part of the reason...
I love how confident he is.
He nods.
I mean, I feel comfortable in this room.
So part of the reason we haven't been welcomed into this higher course,
the Galactic Empire,
exactly, the Galactic Federation,
or whatever,
is because this is essentially a no-go zone. And so I bring up the idea of Australia because what the British were trying to do is they were trying to keep the French from expanding through all of Southeast Asia. So as a deterrent, they intentionally made Australia into a penal colony. This is also how they reduced overcrowding in their own prisons. So is there a chance that a more advanced civilization is doing that to all of us, but instead of just one continent, they're essentially doing that with the entire planet as its colony? So you might ask, well, yeah, but this is still a really big stretch. Like, we don't see the firmament out there. My question is, are you sure we don't see the firmament?
Van Halen belts.
Yes. How about that?
It all comes around again.
So this comes up, I know we've talked about it, because this comes up in all of our Apollo conspiracies that we talk about, the Van Allen belts. So they're named that after NASA scientist James Van Allen. He did something pretty simple but pretty profound. On an early rocket, they attached a radiation detector. And they found that once they got above the Earth, it would spike 2 different times as it was heading out into space. They had essentially a Geiger counter on there. And so what they found out was because our outer core was liquid metal, as it spun, it made a dynamo effect. And it made these 2 bands. When the solar wind, charged particles from the sun, comes towards us, it gets trapped inside these 2 bands in all directions around us. Now, you might remember from our Apollo conspiracies. Fred, can you give us the background on, like, what's the deal with the Apollo moon landings versus the Van Allen belts?
What they're basically saying is astronauts could not go through without being killed from radiation poisonings. They would get a superdose of radiation and it wouldn't function. They would either die or have horrible cancer or stuff along those lines.
And some parts of the LEM, the lunar module, were no thicker than a piece of aluminum foil.
Yeah, it was just tiny pieces of foil.
Now, what NASA says is it's still totally legit. We didn't go right through the meat of the Van Allen belts. The trajectory of the Apollos went through the thinner part, and they weren't in them long enough to actually get this radiation. But then where it gets really, really unsettling is when some of the Apollo astronauts were interviewed when they were still alive, like Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean, didn't even know what the Van Allen belts actually were. So, is this a bigger danger to spaceflight than what NASA is willing to actually admit? I think there's at least a chance of that, because did you know back in 1962, in a secret program, the government literally tried to blow holes in the Van Allen belts. Welcome to Project Starfish Prime. So today there is an international treaty that no nations of the world can deploy atomic weapons in space. That's all because of us, the United States. Back in...
Naturally.
Of course. Bye, Julia.
See you, love.
Hi, I figured I'd try to go at
No, you're good.
Oh, no, you're stuck.
Okay, bye.
See ya.
See ya.
Back in the 1960s, the United States detonated nuclear weapons in outer space. They even had a plan on the drawing board. Thankfully, they didn't do it. They were going to detonate a nuclear weapon on the near side of the moon, so the entire human population, including the Cold War rival, the Soviet Union, could see it. So they attempted to blow a hole in the Van Allen belts to send spacecraft through them. But it backfired. Not only could they not blow a hole in the belt, but the radiation from the nuclear weapons temporarily made a third Van Allen radiation belt around the Earth.
Great.
So where this becomes a really, really big deal, I forgot I had slides on it, is despite some parts of the LEM being no thicker than a couple sheets of aluminum foil, Apollos 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 seemingly passed right through unaffected. And as I mentioned in an interview with astronaut Alan Bean, he didn't even know what the Van Allen belts actually were. Now, in fairness to Bean, you can see his age here. He's in his 70s, maybe early 80s. And obviously, if you talk to your parents who are that age, your grandparents, they tend to forget some things. But this is a pretty life or death thing to actually forget there. Also, would the LEM have had enough shielding to actually be able to protect the Block 2 DSKY computers that they need to get to and from the moon? So here is NASA's official path through the Van Allen belts. It's not directly through it. But where it gets unsettling to me is when they interview NASA scientists today about the Apollo missions, it's almost like they didn't even happen. When they talk about astronauts going to the moon today, they say, well, we don't want to have the astronauts in space for too long because going through the Van Allen belts, that's more radiation than what a human being should really get. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You sent this many crews right through the Van Allen belts, but now you're acting like it didn't even really happen. Now, for some further evidence to this, let's fast forward past the Apollo missions to the space shuttle missions. And if you recall, they only stayed in Earth orbit. They never went beyond that. But STS-31, so this is Shuttle Transit Mission 31, Shuttle Transit System 31, is best known for its deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope, which is still up there today, which is absolutely amazing. But here's the thing people don't know. On this mission, they pushed the shuttle higher than the shuttle had ever gone. And it's not as high as you think. It was only 386 miles. The only human missions that went higher were the Apollo missions, and a couple of the later Gemini missions went way higher than this. So they had them perform a unique experiment. They had them shut off all the cabin lights, and they had the astronauts close their eyes. And the whole crew reported to mission control that they could see what could have only been cosmic rays zipping through the insides of their heads. So in a panic and concern for the astronauts' safety, they had them quickly deorbit the shuttle to a much safer height and come back down, which is pretty wild because if you look right there, look at this. This is now to scale. Low Earth orbit, where the ISS is, where the shuttles would be, is 230 miles. You can see the first Van Allen belt, the inner belt doesn't even start until 1,000 miles up. And 360 miles, they were already getting so much radiation that they had to come back down. So sometimes I kind of wonder, like the astronauts only got 60% of the way there. Look what's happening with our space flight today. We've got the Space Launch System, which was supposed to launch in like 2016, then 2018, then 2020. They've sent it up uncrewed past the moon. They've never actually put humans on this thing. And it just keeps getting bumped back more and more and more. Or look at SpaceX, Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic was supposed to do spaceflight tourism. They were supposed to send people to the moon. Now suddenly, like I know people that work at SpaceX. I know somebody who's still at NASA. Like, these are brilliant people, but it's interesting because at least as far as the public sees, it's like we're hitting a wall symbolically, or is it literally too? Like, is there some barrier there that we can't get past because somebody else put it there?
Well, no other nation has sent anybody to the moon. Everything's been unmanned.
Yes.
Why aren't they sending human beings to the moon?
And you could go two ways. You could say our secret space program has gotten so good, anti-gravity propulsion has gotten so good, that that's what we're doing. We're just putting all our eggs in that basket. And then what the public sees is a coordinated stall. Or you could go the even more sinister way. We are literally trapped here. Space agencies know it. All the best nations, the most powerful nations in the world know it. And so now they're just doing this tap dance to try to avoid actually telling the public about it. So this is what are called red sprites, which are pretty weird. This is upper atmospheric lightning that occurs above the cloud tops. Or some people say reflecting off the dome of the firmament, depending on your perspective. We have a lot of weird upper atmospheric phenomenons, and the names are also quite curious for them. We've got sprites, we've got blue jets, we've got elves that are up there as well. Modern rocket launches. Did you guys just see this the other day? Everybody was reporting UFOs over Pennsylvania. And initially I double-checked. SpaceX had a launch in California and one in Florida. All the SpaceX launches are doing this. And they didn't do this for decades. But they're now all showing brightly colored plumes. So this is officially rocket vapor tracers that they're sending so people on the ground can watch the flight of it, or just normal outgassing of the rocket. But it's fascinating because for decades straight in spaceflight, this never happened. Now all the launches are doing this. So some people are asking, is it happening because they're getting frustrated and they're trying to probe that firmament? Even look at a modern rocket launch. Now, how I would look at this from a scientific background, a science teacher background, this rocket is going up and up and up. It's getting to a height where it hits orbital velocity and is now orbiting around a curved Earth. But the firmament believers, and I guess the flat Earth believers, are basically saying, no, they can't get past the firmament. They're getting high enough up that you don't see where the rocket lands, and what you're actually seeing at the right-hand side there isn't it actually attaining orbit. It's that rocket coming back down and splashing down in a deserted part of the ocean where you're not actually seeing it. So that would be the Truman Show. So to try to wrap this up, and I can wrap it up in a neat way, let's go back to former Nazi SS turned American citizen turned first head of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama, Dr. Wernher von Braun. So he's brought over here through Operation Paperclip, just like a lot of the Nazis were. They're made American citizens. They were embraced by our public despite their war crimes. And so he's the creator, the architect behind the epic Saturn V rocket booster that takes 9 crews of Apollo astronauts to the moon. Now, we could go a lot of directions with von Braun. One thing that he had told his subordinates that's very unsettling to me today, he said, the true powers of the world are going to try to control the human population through 3 different threats. He said the first threat is going to be the Soviet Union, which seemed fair at the time of the Cold War. He said the second threat is going to be terrorism, which is impressive that von Braun says that decades before terrorism was even a thing you had to worry about. He said the third and final thing, they will try to control humanity through a fake alien invasion, which is getting very, very close to Project Bluebeam today. But here's where I want to end with von Braun. You can visit his grave. He is buried in Ivy Hill Cemetery in Alexandria, Virginia. And overall, he was a humble man. He's not buried in this big area that you see. This is at the center of the graveyard. He has a simple, unadorned grave marker. And on the grave marker, you can see right here. Sorry, my layering was off. Let me fix my layering so you can see the whole thing. Sorry, I kind of killed it.
No worries.
You can see Psalms 19:1. So what does Psalms 19:1 actually say? Here's the verse. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So isn't it fascinating that one of the pioneers of our space program on his tombstone lists a verse from the Bible that mentions the firmament? So I thought that would be a cool way to end our nature
That's awesome.
of reality.
That's very good. I just sat there and absorbed it all. This was a good one.
Well, I was worried because part of what makes these podcasts so great is your feedback. And I was worried, like, oh, we're not getting enough Fred in here.
Oh, no. I'm in addition to being tired. I mean, I was like literally, and my mind was going and visualizing what we were talking about. I mean, I enjoyed this a lot.
Thanks.
Man, that was I was in a lot of different places along the lines of this, but I'm like, wow, and this was one of the ones that really got me. So
the nature of reality is just, I mean, and it's tough because I don't think a lot of people like to talk about it because it rubs up against their religious beliefs or their perceived religious beliefs, or they feel like they're not going to, they know a little bit about physics, but they are not great at articulating it. And they don't want to be labeled. And it's just to get people willing to talk about, because personally for me, I have no problem talking about it, knowing that I'll be ignorant in a lot of areas of science. But the idea of where we came from or what is our actual reality as it seems.
Yes. Well,
it's a big one for me.
Yes. I mean, literally, James and I have talked about. I mean, I'm Catholic as well too, and some of my beliefs, would go against Catholic, ideas and stuff like along. But yeah, I believe we do this all again. I believe everything's pre-planned. I believe that, for me, I've already been on everything has been laid out for me.
So you think you've had past lives?
Oh, I believe that. I actually do wholeheartedly believe that. And then when I came back, I was shown you can go this way, you can go this way, you can do this, you can do that, and everything I thought it, but it goes along the line as this has been programmed, this has been, this is the plan. And
are we pawns? Are we just pawns?
Well,
in a bigger,
we just respond like in a game
of free will.
I think we're only pawns when more powerful people, whether it be tech oligarchs, politicians, reptilians, negative entities, try to manipulate us. I think the idea, because I'm Catholic and I am a very, very big believer now in past lives with everything I read. But to me, it strengthens my faith in God.
Exactly.
The overall concept I see in these books is all of existence is trying to continue to grow and perfect your soul so you can get closer to God. Because, think about this. If you didn't have past lives, or if you didn't have multiple chances, what happens to, not to get political, but all the babies who get aborted? Or some little kid who gets, hit by a car? Is your entire existence really just those couple months?
That random.
That random. And I feel like the only way death truly makes sense in a universe where there is a loving and forgiving God is if you keep getting chances at this.
Absolutely, and that's something that those have always been my views, even from a young kid. Yeah. You get till you get it right, or till you learn what you need. When you learn what you need to do is in this one to pass your test. It is like a virtual video game, and if you want to start with caveman, and here's where this is where my mind was going. We were talking about it earlier. We've talked about past human civilizations. Yeah, your game ran out. Your PlayStation broke. For that one, and you had to restart the game at caveman. Or whatever, and work your way back up. Through whatever, to get to where we are now. And then what's the future? Eventually, will we find if there's an infinity, or will our game break again? You know what I mean? Will we have to start? And it's just, we could be somebody's plaything. We could be a prison colony stuck here, an experiment. But, I think that the more we come back, the more we learn, the more advanced we become, that does. That brings us closer to God. That does answer. We'll always have the question: where did we come from? Where are we going?
But is that a form of constructed peace for us more than it is?
It's what you make it. Life's what you make it. I mean, if that's where you find your peace,
I'm not knocking it. I'm asking a question. Like,
no,
we are living in an amazing time right now because we are seeing the creation of technology to a degree where it's able to create these worlds you just described. So if we're able to do this in a 60-year window, who's to say this wasn't done millions of years before, over and replicated and replicated and replicated, and there can be an infinitesimal amount of these worlds, and we just happen to be right here in our own little insignificant place, all maneuvering together, but orchestrated in some way bigger experience.
And that's consistently what you see from these people who have these experiences. Like, I want to emphasize for anybody watching or listening to this having an existential crisis, don't for even a split second think that heaven is not real. Like, I would stake my entire life on the fact that it's real. I just think, and being Catholic, I don't think this directly contradicts Catholic teaching, but I think maybe the mistake we make is once you get to heaven, you're just there for an eternity. Wow. And I feel like even the most amazing thing forever and ever, you might eventually want to do something else. I think heaven is a beautiful place, but I think you can stay there as little or as long as you want. Think about it like a Club Med, essentially, of the cosmos. And then when you're ready to try again, you pick your life, you pick your experience. I even think you get to pick your time. So don't assume that because we're up to the calendar year 2025, anybody who reincarnates has to be beyond that. I think you can go experience any time that you want. And the whole purpose is to try to grow closer and closer to the one.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
The one thing I worry about, and Fred, I want to get your take on this, but with talking about this, I do worry in all the years I've read about UFOs and spirituality, I am afraid that there is some bigger, darker secret here. And we get so frustrated with governments and their secrecy, but I feel like something in this presentation is what they're actually keeping secret from us. Because I'm really to the point, I really think if it was just physical aliens from another physical planet in our realm, I think we would know this by now. It could be the darker element of, hey, you thought hell was like a totally different place. No, like hell is here on earth. We've got these spiritual realms interacting here. It could be that. Or it could be more like a firmament thing, like, yeah, don't worry, Earth is round, but bad news, we're trapped here, and governments have been trying for the better part of a century to get away from here, and we can't seem to do it. I feel like there's this deeper, darker secret that they're keeping from us.
Like we're a prison colony.
Yes, that's way more scary than just aliens.
Well, now I want to jump into this alien thing. In the Bible, God sent the rebellious angels here, and He threw them underground, and they were stuck here. They were, and that's kind of says it right there. You're stuck there. If they can't get out, if they can't get away, neither can we.
Yes.
And so it kind of spells that out in the Bible that they were cast down, and this is where you're going to be forever.
Is that where the idea of hell being underground? Is that where that came from?
I think so. And to your point, I actually have just been reading a lot on this. Officially, scripture scholars think God cast down 200 rebellious angels. And some people are starting to look at impact craters on the earth. And they're like, well, we've got about 200 of them. So that's like where they all hit. Now, me personally, from the astronomy side, I know enough about like the natural processes of the earth. Like, so many different craters have been wiped out over time through erosion plate tectonics, but I at least like the idea of it. And what I think about the hell on earth is it's almost like these angels would be so powerful and so smart. It's like, okay, if we're trapped here, we are going to pollute your souls enough that you all are going to be stuck here with us, because that's really the only way they could get back at God then. Like, okay, you're going to let us trapped here, then we are going to do our best to completely dismantle your creation.
And that's, and that's what's it's funny is that those are things that I think about Man, that's messed up in my free time. But yeah, so that's just them. I mean, that was their thing. Do not give them knowledge. Do not give them. And that's what they did. And our punishment is their punishment. We're stuck here. So we can't go out there and see everything else. We're stuck, but we don't know that.
Oh, I just saw something terrifying about these angels the other day. If you look at all the angel names, especially these bad angels, what do they all end with?
Oh.
E-L.
E-L. Yeah, Michael.
And so
yeah.
people are like, E-L is the electricity. And that's like the evil, like we're becoming so technology-based, we're playing right into their hands, and we're using that negative means of communication, and it's helping actually trap us.
Wow.
Now, the other creepy thing I just saw, I'll have to add a slide, but it's terrifying, is somebody asked, and I watched the full-length video on Instagram about it. Somebody asked AI, what is the breakdown here on Earth of how many people have souls, how many people are clones, how many people are robots, and then how many people are NPCs? Are you all, since you guys aren't into video games, you're familiar with NPCs? Okay, it's terrifying, but you have to know about it. NPCs is short for non-player character.
Okay.
And it's becoming a big thing with like the younger generation, so it's a good term to know. So like, let's say you're playing like The Legend of Zelda, and you've got Link in a town, okay? All the characters, like maybe you go into the armory to buy a sword, you go into the tavern to get a drink. All those characters aren't through the whole game like Link is. They only exist in that moment, so when he's in the town, it's actually real.
They're bit players.
Yes, exactly. So that's this newer conspiracy about NPCs. And so the idea is, like, if you look through the Old Testament, like God talks about only like 144,000 who are like truly blessed. And so some people have this idea with how far cloning's getting. Or a lot of people think a lot of our politicians have been replaced and they're, animatronics. They're robots now. So somebody the other day asked AI, what's the actual breakdown? And it was terrifying. If you can believe it, and it's up to each individual person, AI said that 10% of humans here on Earth were actually robots. 10 to 15% are clones, and 50% of them are NPCs that don't really have like deep thought, don't ponder their own spirituality, their own existence, are only here to essentially keep the simulation going. So if you did the math of it, it ends up being up to 80% of human beings, according to AI, are NPCs, robots, or clones, and only 20% are actually like ensouled and are going on through that. Now,
that would be insane.
It's thought-provoking, but it's also dangerous because if you look at the history of war, when one nation wants to go to war with another nation, the number one tactic they use, and like Nazi Germany was very effective at this, is you want to dehumanize your opposition. And so I think it's also dangerous because is AI programmed to do this? So if it catches on enough, we're like, well, I don't care if that happens to that person, like they don't have souls anyway. Like we're just the special ones that do. So I tend to hope that all human beings have souls. To not think that way, I think, is a slippery slope. But I did want to throw that in there because AI just came out with that just the other day.
That's cool.
Oh. What a way to end it.
This was a good one. This one got my attention. Got my mind moving.
James, excellent, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. I'd only done this presentation one time, so going through it with you guys, I'm like, oh wait, what's the next slide? I think we got
that was great.
Okay.
All right, we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Episode 12, a big one in
12
the books.
Points.
12.5, 12, 12 and a half, 12 3/4.
It was a long time in the making here.
Can I give a quick shout out?
Yeah.
I don't do many personal shout outs.
Absolutely.
My buddy Brett, he went to high school with me. He's now a police officer down in Maryland, and he is like your biggest fan. And he always asks me, like, when are you doing our episode of the Eric McKenna Project? So, Brett, my man,
Brett,
this one's for you.
Here we go, partner. Thank you for the support. Appreciate it. All right. Until we do it again.
Awesome.
Look out for the aliens.